Yep, it's morning, isn't it?
It is. Good morning.
Well, first of all, my name's Richard Von Rams. A little background on me, I did 30 years in the Air Force.
Thank you.
Another 17 years in federal service.
Oh.
I retired twice.
He's a chief. He's probably a GS 13 or 14.
No, I didn't get that high. It's a GS 11, so. Anyways, went to the Master Gardener class in 2012. I enjoyed the vegetable garden that we have, and that's where I spend most of my time. And somehow I got finagled into the drip irrigation system that was there. So be careful what you volunteer for. Okay, questions? I usually like questions anytime. Raise your hand, yell at me, whatever.
We're doing that yelling thing.
Okay. See if this will work. The benefits of drip irrigation. Basically, that's it right there. Conserve water. Your drip irrigation, you put the water where you want it. You don't put it on the leaves, you don't put it on your sidewalk, you don't put it on your driveway, you put it where you want it. Basically, at the root system of the plant, your water. And that's what it's for. Reduces disease. If you're not spraying water on your plants or your vegetables or whatever, you're going to cut down on fungus. Usually that's the big thing, especially in roses. Then you got lower costs. Now there will be an initial cost to put in the drip irrigation system. But after that, you should save water on the water system in your house. There will be little maintenance over the years of maintaining the drip irrigation system, depending upon, do you have hard water here?
Yes, very hot.
Good. That's why you use rainwater harvesting, because it doesn't have calcium. So, anyways, you got the hard water, you're going to have problems with calcium on the drippers. If you already use it, you'll know about it. Soil preservation, basically, you're not going to have water runoff. Like when we have flooding rains here once in a while, you may have a little soil runoff with drip irrigation jump. It's basically going to be right there at the plant. It's not going to run off or anything. Low maintenance, pretty much, once you get it installed, you won't have too much maintenance other than maybe replacing drippers or some of your drip tape if you use drip tape if it gets calcium, the calcium buildup. And then maximize the growth. Since you're putting the water with the plants, at the plant roots, you're going to help that grow better. And one thing too is with drip irrigation, you're not going to saturate the soil so it won't kill the plants, hopefully. So this is where if you use it, you're going to test how long you need to leave it on. Yes.
Richard, is there anything that you can do about the calcium buildup on that tape?
With drip tape?
Yes?
Not really. We use a lot of drip tape at our vegetable garden, and I may get 2 or 3 years out of it, but then I have to pull it.
Okay. Because that's what I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe you had a secret. And one more question. Because we're in Guadalupe County and you're in Kamal County, can we still call you if we have a question?
Sure.
Because when I start doing it, a lot of times I know exactly what I'm doing it until I start doing it. And I'm not a phone caller. I won't call you a whole lot. Don't worry.
The other thing you might want to do, if you don't mind driving to New Braunfels, you know where our garden is? It's on the west side of New Braunfels off of 46. It's a recycle place. We're behind it. You drive in and you go past the recycle place and you go back to the Aguilas area. Our gardens are back there. I'm usually there from 7:30 to 9:30, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. So if you don't mind driving, come over and I can show you what we have. That's what I usually tell people, especially in our area.
Did you say Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. But the only time we aren't there is it's really, really cold and it's raining real hard. Then, even on holidays, we'll be there.
Thanks, that would be better for me than the telephone.
Right, that I can show you what we have.
Thank you.
What were your hours?
7:30.
7:30 to 9:30. I'm usually there.
So if it rains really, really hard, that means you're a fair weather garden?
Did he say it was Air Force?
Pretty close, yes, pretty close.
Just checking.
What was your address again?
The address to the
It's 325 Resource Drive. And it's on the west side of New Braunfels. You're going out on 46, going to Bernie for about maybe 3 or 4 miles, and we're on the left-hand side. If you see the big mulch piles, that's where we're at. Okay.
And you'll talk to us even though we're Guadalupe County?
Yes. I won't hold it. All right.
Old Frank.
There we go.
There you go.
Basically, this is what the irrigation is used for. Water crops and support plants. That's the basic reason you do drip irrigation. This is how we get it naturally.
We do.
When it happens. Rainfall and flood. Then it needs to be artificial. Sprinklers, hoses, silver hoses, and drip irrigation. Soaker hoses, most of you are familiar with soaker hoses. Boards made out of rubber tires or whatever. It's not pressure compensating, so the thing is, at one end you may have more water than you do at the other end, plus the holes are different places. It's okay for certain things, but I wouldn't use it if you're on a hillside. Flat is okay. But anyways, it's easy to install. In fact, it's easier to install than drip irrigation.
That's old technology.
Yeah, but they still
Yeah,
have
I
it.
still use it.
They still have it. They still
And
have
it's
it.
cheaper, right?
Should be level.
It's not necessarily cheaper.
Yeah.
So I've been attempting to make this work in my race bed. What do you mean by pressure vector layer? And filter, inside.
The pressure regulator part is more for drip irrigation rather than this. But you could, if you got too much pressure, you don't want to blow it out.
Oh,
So
it's
you might wanna-
attached to the actual faucet?
Yeah, well, no, there are regulators you put in line to take your water pressure down, say from 60 or 70 pounds down to 30 or 35. And the filters, if you, well, I'll get to it later, but the filter, if you got really dirty water, you got silt, sand, or whatever it is in your water system, the filter will take that out, because if you don't, it's going to plug up your drippers. This is another thing to keep a watch on. Low pressure water to soil surfaces and plant root zones. That's what it does. And most drip systems are low pressure. They usually say not above 30, 35 pounds pressure. So, but in our gardens, I have gotten away from using the pressure reducer because some of our zones are pretty good size. We got a lot of drippers. Plus, I make sure that the hose, or the connections, that put them up on top. If not tight, maybe a little off. And we've had it. So it's up to you if you want to use a pressure reducer on your system.
What was that number you gave? Above, don't go above what, 32?
30, 35 pounds.
30, 35.
But, like I say, we get ours out of a well, it's probably 50 or 60. Yeah. We just make sure everything is tight. If you notice right there, that indentation right there, that's an embedded emitter in a half-inch tube. And you can see where the drip is right there. And those drippers determine the rate of the drip. So if it's half a gallon an hour, that's what it'll drip. So they determine how much water your plant's going to get. Now, you can leave it on longer if you want, or less, depending upon what the plant's doing. Because you're going to have to monitor it for a while to determine if you want to leave it on for half an hour or if you want to leave it on for an hour. So you're going to have to watch it. Once you get it done, then you're set.
I'm in the middle of that right now. I have a brother in the business, installed drip irrigation in I've got these 32-inch high beds. a couple of weeks ago, and it's been every day, man, I've been out there monkeying with that.
Yeah. Well, once you get set up,
Figure out how much to saturate it, you know.
and also depending upon your plants, whether you're gonna use a half a gallon dripper or a gallon dripper or whatever. You just, like on trees, you probably wanna use 2 or 3 gallon drippers per hour, so.
And it also depends on how hot it is.
True. During
Right
the-
now, it's kind of crazy hot, so it's like, you have to leave it on a little bit more.
Yeah, during the summer, I usually have to leave ours on a little bit longer. I usually water 3 times a week, 60 minutes to 90 minutes a day. So, okay. Here's a little history. Been around for a long time, irrigation. Not necessarily drip, but irrigation. If you're familiar with OLAs, basically it's clay that's porous, and it just seeps water out when you bury it in the ground. I tell people I like to read westerns. In the westerns, they talk about OLAs on the back porch. They have it hanging, so it evaporates water off the side, and it's cool drinking water. So that's another thing.
Kick it.
You may have to. That's what, we have one OLA in our gardens by our office. This there. There's
Just there.
from then to now. Basically, plastics has made it available for us to do drip irrigation. And in this case, Israel, perhaps to be in a desert area, needed a lot of it, and they were the ones that patented the first drip emitters. So, thanks for oil and plastics. Now it's pretty common. A lot of commercial people use it, homeowners use it. It's getting a lot of it is out there. And then parts, information, there's books, library books you can get. Go online, you can Google drip irrigation, or what they call it, micro irrigation. Either one, you can find lots of tutorials, and you can find companies that will sell you lots of drip irrigation parts. And I do, for ours, I do go through one company to get the drip tape that we use, because big box stores, they don't have drip tape, so, but I'll show you some of that later. Okay, there's my break. Advantages, okay, there we go. Covers hard to reach places and slopes. Like if you got flower beds around your house, you can put in a drip irrigation system. Once you put it in, you don't have to worry about it. I have seen a spray system that's along the house for the flower beds and the bushes. It sprays it, converted to a drip system. I have not done it, but I have seen it done. It uses less water. Improves oxygen level in soil, healthier plants, less stress, limited weed growth, definitely, especially if you mulch. Now, I don't recommend burying the drip system, but you can mulch over it. That's okay. And like I said, it eliminates the runoff and erosion. But those are some of the big benefits.
Sir?
Yes.
It says no soil saturation. You don't want that? Or like,
You don't want it waterlogged.
well, no, not waterlogged, but you want the whole surface of the bed covered, right?
No, just water where your plants
I
are.
plant all over my bed.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay, then you're probably gonna have to water the whole thing.
Water the whole thing, just let it soak, man, about 3 hours at a stretch.
That's Mac, dare to be different.
I don't have enough square footage to do what I need to do.
Okay, this is what a drip system looks like when it's working. I think those are onions right there. But anyways, that's what it looks like above ground. And that's probably drip tape. And,
Are those the gardens we were talking about earlier in Comal County? Or no?
you know, I don't know where that's at.
Okay.
Yeah, they got the
This is drip tape. that we use. That's the connector for hooking it up, and then that's the end cap for it.
So this whole thing we're looking at right here is just a piece of long drip tape? Or is that a pipe?
Looks like it.
This is drip tape here. There'll be a connector right there to screw it into the PVC. And that's,
The green orange here.
Do you prefer the tape versus the?
two purposes. The tape is good for straight line. You don't, if you try to bend it, it's not keep it.
Right.
Don't bend it. So we use both. I use both drip tape and the half-inch and quarter-inch tubing.
I was gonna say, do you buy it in long pieces and you cut it yourself, or you have to
Yeah.
buy it in certain sizes?
I can buy that in different size rolls. I usually buy like 4,000 foot roll for our uses. Before price increases, you can get it for about $250. So it's
And then you
pretty
put the
cheap.
ends on
And
yourself?
you, huh?
And then you put the ends on your tongue?
Yes. And the drip tape comes in different spacing on the drippers and different gallons per hour. So you can select the sizes you want, just like you can the drippers that you plug into the half-inch tubing.
They're pre-cut, the holes are on it.
Yes, the holes are already embedded. And you do not want to punch a hole in that and try and put a dripper in it.
Right.
It will not work. Okay. Do you have mostly clay soil out this area?
Yes.
Yes.
This is what it looks like underground when the dripper's working. And you notice in sandy soil, it goes pretty much straight down. That's why if you have sandy soil, you may have to water more often for the roots. Okay, here's basically most of your components that you're going to have for your system. Start out with your hose bib on the side of your house. And then you got your water lines. Low flow, low pressure devices, regulators, filters, emitters required. Controller, timer, nice to have. We use controller and timers on ours, turn them on and off when we're not there. So, and I try to do most of our watering at night in our gardens. And it seems to work okay. Now, sometimes they'll do it in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever, but usually I try to do most of it at night. And don't do it all at the same time. That's why I have like zones you would for your yard and you have a watering system for your grass.
So is your timer's mechanical or?
If you want to pass this around, this is what we use. This is a battery operated timer. This is the valve that is
Opens and closes.
And if you do install something like this, make sure you follow the arrows. The arrows on this. But anyway, this particular timer, battery operated, it'll handle up to 4 of these. Now, I only have 2 max on any one of mine because of my locations in the garden. And you can set this for any time of the day, length of time you want it on. You want to do like odd and even days, you can do that. Whatever, this will handle it for you.
I got you.
Yeah, if you want to pass that around.
Richard, that sounds really easy, but is that easy? Because this is where I'm having a real breakdown with my irrigation system. And I have zones, I did this, but it's the timer part. I mean, I can go out there and manually turn that baby on, I can get any zone going at any time. The timer part, maybe it's in my head, I don't understand. Is it in your garden in Kamal County?
Yes,
A timer thing?
yeah, that's what I use.
Okay, good.
That's what I use.
Good question.
Yes.
When you say filters, what type of filters and what is their purpose and where are you attaching them?
Okay. Hold that question for a minute. We'll get to another slide and then we'll discuss it. And then your distribution system. That's your tubes, connectors, and fittings. In our gardens, most of our water to our beds is underlined with PVC, underground with PVC. And we just come out with PVC and then we connect our tubing to it. There's a basic system right here. Here's a picture of, I have it over here too, the whole thing. This will show you all the components that you might have in your system.
Can you go back one slide just for a second?
Okay.
Can we get a picture of that? Please.
There,
Thank you, thank you. You know, if you go like to, okay, we call it Big Bot, whatever the hell. It's Home Depot, and you get the little drip system thing. It also has a little kind of map that shows you how to do kind of all of this. Yeah.
well, I'll tell you now,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so.
this is a kit,
Yeah.
and Home Depot, yes, they sell these.
Yeah.
I would say about $30, but I haven't priced it recently.
Yeah.
46.
Huh?
46.
This is 46 now?
Yeah.
Cool. But when I bought mine, it was about $30.
Yeah.
But that's a few years ago. Anyway, yeah, this is, if you haven't done it before, it's a good one to start with.
See the map on the back?
Yeah. It also comes with a booklet inside.
Yes, it
And
does.
it's got,
And then you can go online and
Right.
have them help you.
well, that's what part of the online stuff. You go on there, they got all kinds of stuff.
It's like way too much to know.
Okay, so what we have is, start with the faucet, okay, on your house. Backflow preventer. Now, older houses may not have a backflow preventer, but newer homes, I think they have to automatically put them on. So it'll be there. This kit actually comes with one. The timer, this particular timer is mechanical. You just turn it to whatever, up to 2 hours. And when it shuts off, it shuts off. At my house, my timer is the little electronic timer. I get out of my kitchen and take it outside and put it on for 45 minutes. When it goes off, I turn my water off. I haven't gotten that far on my system yet. Another thing you might want to think about too is, at this point right here, if you want to have the capability to put a hose on there, you might want to put a Y there. So you can put this on and a hose, just in case. That'd be up to you.
And remember when you're doing this too, wrap it with cellophane tape, not cellophane, wires.
Plumber's tape.
Plumber's tape,
Yeah.
but it's called something else. Anyway.
It's a
so
white
that
plumber's tape.
It doesn't leak.
Yeah. Now, well, most of these, all right, most of the threads here, on all of this, is hose thread. There is, now, we get to it later, but there's also pipe thread. So, they're different, and be careful. Some of these, like this thing right here, they sell it both hose thread and pipe thread. And sometimes, big box stores, there are people when they put stuff on the shelf, you say box. I bought 2 of these a while back, and I should have looked at the color. The hose thread has the black, pipe thread has the gray piece right there. And so, anyway, I take it back as the right one. So just be careful when you get stuff, hose thread versus pipe thread. The pressure regulator, right there. That particular one comes with this kit, or they sell them separate in the box. So, filter housing. Now, this is the filter I was talking about. Basically, just for getting dark, silt, whatever it is that's in your. If you got really dirty water, you can. This thing unscrews here. This is inside. You just take it out, wash it off, put it back in. And you're good to go. That's the filter. That's the hose start. Now, this particular system here, the hose, this half-inch polyvinyl, fits inside that connection, okay? It's hard to get in, and once you get it in there, you're not gonna get it out. It's like those Chinese finger things, okay? That's what it is. And it won't come out. I don't care what your water pressure is. Well, maybe if you got up to 150, you might, but yeah, anyways, that's, you will not get that out of there. You can if you want to really work hard at it, which I have done several times. Coupler, if you decide you need to extend your system, that's what you use right there, same deal. Tubing, half-inch. Now this particular tubing does not have the emitters embedded, but you can buy half-inch tubing and quarter-inch tubing with the emitters embedded in it. And we'll get to that later. Got your T, this is all half-inch. Then there's an end cap. Now the end cap is a lot like this, except that's a cap on the end. And this part is the same, but there's also a figure 8. That's cheaper.
Yes. And my husband thinks, he thought, oh, that won't work. But it does, it really does work.
It does. Yes.
I would like to just add something because I saw this at the Sherps Community Garden. They just used a zip tie instead of a figure 8. They just crimped it and put a zip tie over it, and it seemed to be working fine for them. It bends the
Elbow. Now that quarter-inch tubing, you can barely see it on this picture, but that has emitter embedded in it. And I think most of them are about a half a gallon an hour. And the half-inch tubing, same thing. And if you look right there, that's where the emitter is, right there. I think that's a half a gallon an hour on that. Then you got the dripper. That is right there. You can get them in different values, from a half a gallon up to 4 or 5 gallons an hour. Then let's see the next one. That says sprayer, but it's not a sprayer. What it is an on-off valve for quarter-inch. It's got a little, right on top, see that little piece right there? You turn it, and it turns it on and off. So if you have a quarter-inch line going someplace you want to shut it off, that'll work for you right there. This one is an adjustable sprayer. I think it sprays more like an umbrella. Not misty, but like lines coming out. You know, I have a picture of it of one of them. And that's the figure 8. Cheapest way to do it, unless you want to use the zip ties. Okay, connector. That's how you connect a quarter-inch line to a half-inch. And I'll also say the kit comes with a hole punch, or you can buy them separate. So it's, and also, depending upon how cold it is, you might want to use hot water or a hot air gun to warm up the ends of the quarter-inch when you want to put it over the end of this bar right here.
I found that to be true. It was
It's not
hard
going to
for
expand.
me to punch it.
Pardon?
I found that to be true. It was very hard for me to punch it. I'm not very strong.
Also, well, you can also use, I use a pair of pliers when I push these things in. So I don't have, my fingers are not as strong as they used to be. So put the pliers on there and just punch it in.
Do they make the punches in different diameters so that the holes are different sizes?
No, not really.
Not really, but let me get to one other thing here. Inline dripper. Goof plug.
That right there.
Now that goof plug, it does have the little shaft on either side of that round piece there. It's a different diameter. So if the hole that you're trying to plug is a different diameter, you've got a capability of using either one side or the other. Because I think some places, we were donated a lot of this half-inch stuff from a vineyard, and the holes they used were just a little bit bigger than, say, like that blue hole punch would make. So I had to use up the other end of this, the bigger end. But yeah, that's what that's for. You can either plug a hole in this, or you can cap off the end of the quarter-inch line. That's what it's for.
And they work really good.
Oh, yes, they do. L, T, all the same. Then the end gripper. Quarter inch line goes over that. I'd say green side up.
Green side up.
If you're familiar with that joke.
Yep.
Any questions on this? Yes?
On the drippers that I have, they're different colors.
The color determines how much it puts out.
What do you do when you lose it?
Go to the store and look up another package. Or make sure you write it down someplace. Yeah, I never remember. Yes?
Do you find that those little tubes, the quarter-inch ones, those last very long in Texas?
Talking about quarter-inch lines?
Like the small ones, yeah, the small ones, do those last?
You talking about this?
I feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like possibly.
I haven't had that much problem with it. You know, like, you talking about deteriorating in the
Yeah,
sun?
because everything's deteriorates.
The soaker hose is worse.
Oh,
It is.
okay.
Soaker hose, if you leave it in the sun, it may be 1 year good, and it's so brittle it cracks. So, yeah. But now, we've had no real problems with the quarter-inch or the half-inch line. Anybody else? Okay.
Hey, Richard,
Yes.
you know the dripper that you have there up at the top by the elbow? That first dripper that's up
Yeah.
there? If you have that clogged up with calcium or something, do you pull that out, put in a goop plug, or do you just punch another hole and put in another dripper?
If you put in another dripper, it may not leak. You could try it. But if it does leak, then you would have to put a goof plug in and punch another hole. The other thing I might point out, on some of these drippers, they unscrew. And if you want to clean them, with something to take out the calcium, you can do that. But some of them are like this one, I don't think, these are all pressure fitted, so they won't pull apart very easily. I mean, you can try and soak them in strong vinegar or something, then stick them back in and see if it works. I've done that on some.
That's what I do. What I get is a big bin, a plastic bin, and I put that vinegar in it from Home Depot. And then I just put all my stuff in at the end of the year. And then I dry it out. And then next year it's ready to go.
So you can try it. Getting started. Begin small. Like I said, use a kit. Especially if you haven't done it before. I mean, if you've been playing with it for a while, then you don't have to worry about it. You can go out and buy your parts and pieces if you do it. Have a basic plan. I always tell people, on your bed, what are you going to put in? Are you going to put in tomatoes and peppers? Or are you going to put in radishes and carrots or green beans or whatever? Then you can determine what you're going to use. If you want to use the round stuff here, or if you want to use drip tape. Have a plan on what you're going to do. And like this kit comes with all that stuff there. You get enough to probably do a 4x16 bed easily. So, use the same brand parts. The reason we say that is manufacturers, when they do their stuff, they say, okay, inside diameter, outside diameter. Like these things here, it's the outside diameter of that determines going into there. Other ones, they use inside where you push it inside the pipe with the tubing. So try and stay with the same brand that you use. And work one area at a time. That way you can figure out what you need to do and the parts you're going to use.
Is that like one zone at a time?
Or one 4x16 bed, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Something that you're easy to work with and doing.
Okay.
And then expand with, when familiar with the parts and that, just expand it later.
Is there ever anything like, okay, like say you've got 4 zones and you're going to have something big coming into that so that you can get 4 zones off of it. If you're going to rotate, do you not have to have anything really big that I can just keep adding zones on?
Yes, like that timer and that valve.
Yeah.
If you use something like that, you can set up your 4 zones You don't have to have, you know, tubing this big to move your water out there.
So I don't
You
need
just
to,
put each one of them on at a different time.
I don't need to worry about planning ahead for what I'm gonna have eventually. I can just do a zone and then I can hook in and,
Sure, you know, you got like, if you got 4 or 5 beds, you can run,
that, yeah.
run the water to each bed with a on-off valve. If you want to put a timer on each one, each bed, that's okay. Yeah, you can do that. And then the other stuff that you put out, whether you're gonna use drip tape or tubing, you can decide that when you're ready to do it.
Okay,
But just,
thanks.
you're talking about getting the water to your beds.
Yeah, I was just worrying that I didn't want to screw up and have to do the work again. If I set everything up and then, well, of course, you don't have enough water to get to, blah, blah, blah. You had to have done this, and so then I have to do it up again. A little bit lazy here.
The water lines at the agri-life gardens, I have underground 3/4 inch line. That goes from here to there, but when I get to the bed, I'll downsize it to a 1/2 inch line. And then that's where I'll put my timer or my valve.
Okay.
And then it will turn on by itself, separate from all the others. And that's why I try to run them at different times.
Yes.
So that I don't have to have a 1 or 2 inch line that run the water out there and have it go at the same time. Okay?
Brilliant, thank you.
So for one system, about how many feet of line would you recommend per system? Because we have like a 20 by 20 raised bed,
Okay.
and then we're gonna add like another 40 by 20. So we want it's one faucet,
Okay.
so can it extend and it will get water to the very last, say 1,000 feet?
I can tell you what we have at our garden. We have several beds that are like 50 by 40. We use one valve, one time on it, and it furnishes enough water to all the drippers. Now, I will say this, a lot of the drippers are pressure compensated, so really, you got 1/2 gallon here and 1/2 gallon there, it's going to be 1/2 gallon on each.
Okay.
But then we've probably got several hundreds of drippers on just one valve. So, and it seems to be okay. In fact, we have run more than one times, and we don't notice a difference in the water pressure. Well, at least with the dripper. So, but the biggest thing is try and do zones so you don't do them all at one time. That'd be the easiest way to do it. But yeah, you should be able to add to it.
Okay, I mean, that's what we're doing. We've had the raised bed part done, and now we've extended the garden, so we're gonna block it out.
On that, like you said, put the live on the bed,
Yeah.
and could I do one side of that, just the drip line to the beds, and then my husband can still have pressure to do whatever he wants to do in the garden, and not get mad that I'm taking up some of the water for my garden? It will still push out enough pressure?
Well, I wouldn't do both of them at the same time. You probably will have some pressure, but you'll notice a decrease in the water pressure on the water hose if you've got the dripper system on too. I
They
noticed
don't have
that.
to be on at the same time
No,
necessarily?
oh no.
Okay.
I wouldn't do the same thing. If you got a timer on it, try and do it in the evening when you're not using the other one. Yes.
Over that way.
Oh, question. So they're talking about water pressure. If somebody has a home that doesn't have a system or a new home and they're thinking about doing some sort of irrigation, drip irrigation, or just watering the grass, etc., with zones, as you mentioned earlier, is it beneficial for them to go out to the water meter and on their side of the water meter put in an additional manifold and have 2 lines from that manifold, one that goes to the house? Because most insurance companies say that you should only have a certain amount of PSI of water going through your home system.
Correct.
And then have a separate line that will typically run maybe 100, 115 PSI, whatever your local water company is pushing, to work the zones and make it more beneficial, where you can actually have maybe a zone of 5 pop-ups that are spraying out 32 foot. Would that be beneficial to some of these folks to consider?
You could, I guess, yeah, you could do that. It's not something I thought about, but yeah, you could do it.
Is that expensive?
Yes.
That sounds expensive.
Well,
Well, you know,
you'd probably have to have a plumber do it for you.
Most of the time anymore with any kind of water company or a rural water company, they're to the point now where anytime you do anything with their meters, they have to have someone that is supposedly certified. Yeah.
But the thing is, if you're putting it on your side of the meter, you should be able to just get some plumber to do it for you.
What's that called again?
What?
What you just described?
Like a manifold?
Adding another manifold.
Something's, there's different names for it.
You know the Y that we were talking about? Okay, you can get those, it's got 3 and 4 connections. That's a manifold.
Yeah. Oh.
The Y is actually a manifold, if you want to say that. But
Yeah, and typically, you usually have to have a certified person. And the main reason I've always been told is they're so concerned about back charges, back flows into their system. And that's what basically they're mainly guarding against. Not how much water they're using, because they want you to use the water, okay? They say don't use that much water, but use the water because that's where we get our money from. And then they'll put you on stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 water rations if they don't have the issue, the problem.
It's the backflow valve, because I know, and we have crystal clear water where I live. And when I was putting in a sprinkler system, they told me I couldn't because I didn't have a backflow valve.
Yeah, that's the backflow preventative on your outside faucet.
Well, see, that's standard if you have Spring Hill water. They require you to, they come around and put it on for you and tell you, threaten you with death if you take it off.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Tim.
Like I say, most if you're gonna have a manifold, make sure that you take it off before the backflow and before the pressure control valve, which normally runs in your house and would only control the pressure, which I can't find mine. But your building, you want a separate one, and it's usually a double check valve backflow preventer. It's about $300 for about that long.
Just to give you an example of putting in a pressure regulator. Some years ago, I was outside and I noticed on my overflow dripper for my water heater was dripping water. I said, uh-oh, I might have something wrong. So I bought myself a pressure gauge, checked my water pressure. I had 150 pounds of water pressure coming into my house. You don't want that. Because most of your stuff in the house is geared for like 60 to 70 pounds max. So just be careful of that. Okay, here's the deal on the hose and pipe thread. The hose thread here is just slightly coarser than the pipe thread is. Now, somebody was asking about maybe how many gallons an hour I can put out on my drippers. Let's just say your faucet puts out 240 gallons an hour, roughly, just a guess. Your system of drippers, you probably don't want as many drippers that would require 240 gallons. So if you had half a gallon drippers, you could probably use 480 if you want to push it. But I wouldn't push it that way. So let's just keep it tested and see how much water you have coming out of your faucet. You can put down a 5-gallon bucket, turn it on, and time it, how long it takes to fill up, and then you can figure out how many gallons per hour you get out of your faucet. But you don't want to have a demand greater than what's coming out of your faucet. Like that one here, 240 gallons should be able to support 201 gallon emitters on your system. And this is what I talked about, converting the sprinkler zones of drip. I don't recommend converting your lawn garden or your lawn to drippers, but that's up to you. But if you want to do your flower bed, so that you're not spraying water all over the leaves and stuff, you can convert it to a drip system, which I highly recommend doing anyways. Now this is our office gardens in our Ag Life office.
You have a deer problem.
Oh yeah. We also, last year, we had an armadillo problem. Armadillo.
Just put some dump trucks out.
Well, we found 4 of them, and it took us about 3 months to catch them all. They will destroy a newly planted area overnight. Unbelievable.
Sounds like feral hogs.
Yes.
Some squirrels,
Yeah.
they put up all the garden.
Yeah. Now, we haven't had problems with the squirrels, but the armadillos are the worst. Now, we do have deer, but we have our whole garden is caged. So we're good. This is an outside timer that the office gardens have. Basically, you got your input, and you got 4 outputs. It's all one unit. It's not a separate unit like that one I showed you here. That's all one unit. And you can buy these things where it has 1 in and 1 out, or 1 in and 2 out, however you want to do it. Battery operated, and basically you can do the same thing. Set it up and down, yes. Yeah, gotcha. This is, you see, there's one of their lines underneath, and no one drippers off. There's a dripper right there. There's an inline dripper, 1/4-inch line. I don't know why they did that. You want to have a little standoff, it's up to you. There's the end dripper. Now here's, if you got pots or tubs or whatever, you can run a 1/4-inch line up. You can either put emitters in there, or you can use 1/4-inch line with embedded emitters and run it around. It's up to you, however you want to do it. You can also run in put a T there, and you can run a dripper on either side of the root base. You can do that too. But this just shows you how flexible your system can be, especially if you have pots or tubs or whatever you want. Yes?
Just a little pre-planning, if you're putting a new pot out, just run the line up through that bottom hole, and then you don't see it.
I was gonna say, is there a way to-
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Lots of ways to do it.
Yeah.
Now there's that adjustable dripper I was telling you about. You can see there,
That's what I use. I like those.
it looks like a umbrella.
Yeah, that's probably what you need.
That's not, I mean, I would classify that as halfway dripper, but
And then you can make it, you can turn the little thing on the top and you can make it come out
Right.
more, or push it
Yes.
the other way, it goes out
I
less.
think these may go from 0 to 10 gallons an hour.
Yes.
So, that's,
Wow.
there's a sprayer. I don't classify that as a dripper, but
Right.
they used it in the office gardens. Okay, this is where our gardens are, on the other side. The office is on one side, and we're on the other side of the park. This is how we do it. We got all of our water lines are underground, bring it up, and then this is all drip tape. What I do with the drip tape in this case, the drippers are 1 foot apart, it's 1/3 of a gallon an hour, and I stagger it. So one side will start 6 inches out, and the other side will start 1 foot up. And I just stagger it all the way out, yes.
What size PVC are you running down the side?
Underground is 3/4 inch.
3/4 inch?
That's what we use. And then, well, I'll tee it off and it comes up at a 1/2 inch PVC.
So do you said it's underground, so when you get it up to the water source, do you have a manifold like 4, like you showed, with the timers and stuff on it?
Not really, because see
No.
those red things on there? That's how you turn it on and off.
On the other end, you mean?
Yeah,
On the other end of that?
on the other end
Turn
of
the
it,
water on.
to set set it in motion.
Oh,
There's a manifold at the water source.
Yeah.
no, probably what it'd be
We
is,
just got one line coming into our
Yeah.
gardens and we're just off of that.
Yeah,
But I don't have a manifold. It's,
How are you getting it?
well, I'm talking about where you got these lines buried
oh,
and
okay.
they come up to the water source.
I think I have one, let me show you.
Okay.
you're just showing off right now.
Yeah. This is some of our 4x16 raised beds with radishes. And this particular tape is 6 inches apart, 1/2 gallon an hour.
So you have your pipe buried underneath, it's 3/4, and then you got a T coming up that's half inch, and then T's to the side half inch. That goes into your thing, okay, I got you.
These here, we had problems with the on-off valves here. They just started leaking on their own. So we started converting them over to metal. So, but that's one of our, that's our traditional bit there. We have a new greenhouse.
Just for reference, about how long are those beds?
This is probably about 45, 50 feet long,
Oh.
about 45, 50 feet wide, this particular one.
That
Now, we got a bed back here, we call our long bed. We got a middle one, it's on over here. It's our new traditional bed. It's not quite that size, but close. Yeah, we got different sizes.
How long has this irrigation system been in place?
Probably when we first started,
When was that?
2011, 2012.
So it's taken a long time. I mean, because you have all these pipes buried in the ground, and I'm interested to see the other end of this when you get there. But how long it took to build all of this is my question.
It wasn't not done in 1 year.
Yeah, it's evolutionary.
Yeah, it is.
Just like your garden.
Our gardens grew over the years. As it grew, we added. So we had to tie into the line. Carry the water, say like back here, I have that on another time.
So it's basically trial and error.
That's how I learned.
Yeah.
Trial and error and on the job training.
Yeah.
A lot of trial and error.
So when you've got it all buried underneath and there's a leak,
You gotta go get
Yes.
you gotta dig all through, you don't know where the leak is.
Well, you'll see the leak.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll see the wet part.
Yes.
Yeah, you'll see it, you'll see it.
The worst thing I have is, I go back to the other bed a minute, if I can get. The worst thing I have is these things get broken off here.
Yeah, I can see that, yes.
I'm careful when I'm doing wheelbarrows and stuff.
Right.
But they don't freeze?
They're usually open all the time, so we haven't had a problem. The only problem I've had with freezing is on our workbench. And that was because it had PVC above ground, going across underneath and it froze. And we didn't have the faucet open. So, but generally, I don't have a lot. Now, with these going to metal, I don't have any problem. But I've never had much problem with these above ground cracking, just on our workbenches, where we have water. Keyhole guard, this is one of our demo beds. A combination of, we use both soaker hose and half-inch hose with drippers on it. This is another bed with the tape drip lines. These are just setting on top of each other. There's no glue, there's no nothing. Just another method of making a bed. Same thing with the keyhole guard. Make one, you can. One of our classes made that for us. There's our square foot garden. Originally, this PVC, most of this was not glued, it was pressure. Somebody was energetic enough on these straight lines, about every inch, they drilled little big holes. And we only had to have them on for about 5 minutes at a time, just to water. But we finally took that out and we put in a regular drip system. There it is up close with onions. My favorite, bunching onions. This is what we used the soaker hose on our pear trees when we first planted them. That was the first year. Second year, we moved on a little bit more. And then the third year, we went with the regular half-inch with the drippers on and didn't use soaker hose. This is a close-up. Now remember, this has threads in there on this particular, on this pipe thread. Pipe thread. Yeah.
You put your, it turns them to two on at the same time?
Yes, you can, like the one that was going around, this has, you get these with an on-off.
Yeah.
There's, that's my bed at home, it was, I did blackberries. And what I had about 3 of these beds on one line, and I had a manifold. I use Y's to go separate, and I can turn them on and off as I want it. I don't have to water them all at the same time. And if you do blackberries, be careful. They will grow out here, And they will run.
But did they taste good?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I gave up on them because I wasn't having much luck with them. There's another one. I made mine portable, so I can move this from one bed to another depending on what I have going. Yes.
So did you change that bed from what it was before in the picture to that because it's mobile now, or was that a different bed?
Different bed.
That one was.
There it is. We're done.
Hello.
No way.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
Damn, time flies.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well,
So basically, Richard, what you're saying is, go to Home Depot, apply for.
I'm going to give you upfront warning. One of them used to be a Marine drill sergeant.
Oh.
What you doing?
I'm Air Force, I have the first one.
We're,
He eats Air Force for breakfast.
Hey, these guys have been doing this for quite a few years. What they're fixing to speak to you guys about. They're one of our favorite speakers. And they're going to be talking to you, they're known as the Rangers. They're going to be talking to you about water harvesting. And they have some fantastic statistics that'll blow you away. So be ready for them because they're going to cover a lot of stuff. They're even going to make a rainwater gathering bucket. And there's some other stuff that they're going to put together for you guys. So we want to welcome
Supreme Commander.
the Supreme Commander. His name is
Larry.
Larry, not Larry,
Stephen Granger.
Stephen Granger. Actually, Larry's son is the commander. So let's welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit about rain harvesting, but we're also going to talk about a couple of other things today. One of the things that I'd like to chat with you a little bit about is your aquifer, the aquifer that you have here. Most of you would draw from the Carrizo Wilcox. And then we will talk a little bit about water demand with Stephen. Then I'll come back and talk a little bit about rain harvesting. And then we'll close the day by building a rain barrel here in class. And then after we do that, we'll give that away. One of you will win that. And then we're going to take and build a wicking container. We're actually going to build 2 wicking containers. And when we finish with those, we'll give those away also. So that's So let me take and then talk a little bit about, first starting with the aquifer. When we talk about the aquifer, that's obviously where we're going to be drawing our water from. And the aquifers throughout Texas have been decreasing rapidly throughout the last few years. Most of it because of the demand that has been placed on it. We are taking it out faster than what we can put it in, and we'll talk a little bit about how that happens as we get further. So let me take and talk first about the Trinity Aquifer, not because you're in the Trinity, but because it is adjoining and very similar to what we have as a Carrizo Wilcox. And so when we talk about the Trinity Aquifer, here we are in Comal County over here, you're over here in Guadalupe, and one of the reasons why I wanted to point that out to you is because part of your county sits right on top of the Edwards Aquifer. And because of that, it's under the Edwards Aquifer Authority, not under your groundwater conservation district, which is what I'm going to come to here in just a second. So when we talk about the Carrizo Wilcox, here we are in Guadalupe County, and now you can see that the Edwards Aquifer is on the eastern section of that, the western section of that, and that is controlled by them, and it's a little different makeup than what we have in the traditional Carrizo Wilcox. And so when we show this, sometimes people feel that this area that is hash marked out here is for some reason a half an aquifer or part. It's not. It's all the aquifer. The difference is that this part over here with the hash marks has kind of a cover on it with hard shale and clay, and it's a little bit more difficult to drill through. So if you're drilling through Delphi here in Gonzales County, it's a little bit more difficult to drill than it is right over here in Guadalupe County. And so as we look at it, we call that a confined area. You can think of it as a hard hat. They're just wearing a hard hat out there. And by the way, as we go through this presentation, all of the various presentations that we're doing today, we make a copy of and we put it on this computer, and you all are welcome to that. You can do anything with it you like. You can put your name on it and just deliver it yourself. And I'm serious as a heart attack, folks. It is important that the information gets out to people. And so we share all of that information that we have with you. Richard's presentation is also going to be on that same slide. So all of them will be available to you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's then go into the Edwards Aquifer. And what I don't like about this graphic is it doesn't show that this portion right over here is underneath the Edwards. It's over there, and for whatever reason, the map that I was able to acquire didn't show that, but it is there. And so when we talk about the Edwards Aquifer, notice that that part is in between Comal County and what you have as your groundwater conservation district jurisdiction. So in between that is the Edwards Aquifer jurisdiction that's right over there. Now, if you live above the Edwards Aquifer and you wanted to drill a well, you cannot drill a well into the Edwards Aquifer. You must go through the Edwards into what's underneath it, and it's either going to be the western side of the Carrizo-Wilcox or the eastern side of the Trinity Aquifer. Both of those aquifers work in the same way. Talk more about that in just a second. Now, I wanted you to see this slide because as you're driving around for various places, you'll see things that are kind of cool. It'll say, a sign will say it's a contributing zone or in a recharge zone. And what does all that mean? In the first place, all of the green area is a contributing zone. If you look at that, you see that we have the rivers kind of going down this way. Because of that, that's the way the water flows. Some of the water, not all of the water, will end up contributing to something in the Edward off of all of that green area, which is way up here past Rock Spring, way up here past Kerrville, way up here past San Marcos. That contributes some water to the Edward. Not all of it, because some of it goes into the Trinity, which is in that same area. The recharge zone, this blue area that you see in the middle, is where the water actually recharges the Edwards. So on the evening news, when you see something clever that says the aquifer level is so-and-so, it's always going to be the Edwards. It's never going to be the Carrizo-Wilcox or the Trinity. And that, you'll see why in just a second. And then down here in the bottom, we have the artesian zone, and that zone is sometimes under so much pressure with the water flowing in that direction that it forces the water out without a pump. And that's why we call it an artesian zone. That's why you have springs as you from time to time. We were at a house just recently visiting them, and he had a spring on his property that ran all year long, and it's an artesian spring. It just takes me some doubt. Somebody had a question. Yes, ma'am.
What does recharge mean?
Recharge means that the water is going to take and fill up the aquifer so that there's more water in it that we can use it. That's a recharge zone.
Like rain?
Well, yes, but the rain goes into the Edwards in a different way than we normally think of, and I'll show you that in just a second.
I guess I'm grasping contributing, like as in rivers go into it, but the recharge, like where is it recharging from?
It's recharging from the water that falls on the surface, and then some of it will go into little fissures, and it'll move underground, and then sometimes it'll be above ground or underground, and then it joins with others, and then eventually falls into big holes that's in the recharge zone.
So like runoff is running it off from other places, it's running into...
Yep, it's just basically runoff water.
I did have another question too. What is the definition of confined and unconfined you had in the other slides?
Confined means that it is confined by a hard layer of shale on top, like a hard hat.
Okay.
And unconfined means it does not have that. And the only reason why it makes a difference is the drilling process. It's a little bit easier to drill through the unconfined.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
That's good. You know, one of those of us who have been teachers most of our lives, one of the reasons why we know we're getting to you is when you have good questions. And so we like good questions because it tells us that we're able to deliver what's important to you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. All right, so when we talk about the recharge zone, we have water that collects up here in the upper Edwards Aquifer, and some of it goes into those fissures, some of it goes underground, and then when it gets over to the Balcones Fault, that's on the far side of New Braunfels, where you come into New Braunfels and go down that great big hill, or going in that direction, you go up that big hill, that's the Balcones Fault. And at that point, that's where the Edwards actually the water drops into the Edwards Aquifer. And then it's stored all the way underneath that, and we're over here in Guadalupe County over in this area, and we have all of this underneath it. That's the Trinity Aquifer, or as we get way over here onto this side, a little bit of the Carrizo-Wilcox. So that's how the water gets into there. And when we look at it from a side cutaway, this is where we have the fissures where the water takes and goes in there, and that fissure then either goes underground or above ground, drops into a sinkhole, then drops into these gigantic caves called karst caves, and then sometimes we get springs that come out of it. And so let's take a look at a sinkhole. This is an actual sinkhole of the water going into the Edwards Aquifer. And if it was raining hard, this is exactly what happens. And that's why it's so important that we don't dump things on the ground that are going to contribute to polluting that water, because it is going live into a big pond underneath the surface. That big pond is going to be these karst caves, and if you were to take and light up a karst cave underneath, it looks just like that. That's what that water looks like. That's the Edwards Aquifer, and that's what you see on the evening news every single day. It's the height of that water, and that's completely different than what you all have in the Carrizo-Wilcox, and I'll get to that in a second. And then the last thing is the spring. Sometimes there's an artesian spring that comes out. And if you've ever been over in Landa Park over in New Braunfels, you may have sat on that piece of rock right over there and marveled at the water coming right out of the side of the hill. It's absolutely an amazing process, absolutely pure water. So that's how the Edwards work. Now, let's go from there and talk about the Wilcox. The Carrizo-Wilcox is actually two aquifers, one on top of the other. And the Carrizo on top, the Wilcox underneath. And so sometimes what happens is people, I don't know where that came from. I have no idea why that's there. Anyway, sometimes people feel like if they get a lot of water up in Tyler, that we get water down here in Guadalupe County. Well, that doesn't happen at all. The water that moves in that aquifer is excruciatingly slow. And it starts way the heck up here at the top of the Texas border and comes all the way down here well past Seguin, and then kind of dies off as it gets just a little bit further, and it goes into another aquifer, which is the coastal aquifer. And so the water moves excruciatingly slow. Second, the water that falls here is what recharges here, and it recharges by sifting through the sand very slowly, to the point where only 4 to 5% of the water that hits the ground will make it into the aquifer, and it takes 2 to 3 years for it to get there to a pumpable state, you see? And so that's the reason why the aquifer is having so much trouble. We've had a drought for the last few years, and because of that, we're taking it out far more rapidly than it is that we're putting it in. And so only about 4 to 5% of that water actually gets down to a pumpable state. And that 2 to 3 years, by the way, is at 450 feet. So if you have a well that's deeper than 450 feet, let's say it's 700 feet deep, well, then you're going to take about 4 years, maybe 4.5 years, for the water that falls today to get to a pumpable state. And only 4 to 5% of it. All right, so let's take kind of a look at, this is us in a kind of a big picture, and you can kind of figure out where you are along the way, all right? And so here's the New Braunfels area, and I want to take and show you that Guadalupe River that comes right through Seguin. Have any of you ever driven up Highway 281? And when you go up Highway 281, there's a McDonald's right at the river, where the river goes underneath 281 at that point. Listen to this part. If it is not now raining, and it hasn't rained for 3 weeks, The majority of the water going under the bridge is effluent that comes out of Kerrville. Effluent. And sometimes people are up in arms about effluent because somebody wants to build a housing development and so on. Folks, don't be afraid of the effluent. When's the last time you heard of somebody getting sick from swimming in that? And then it goes from there to Canyon Lake. And when it leaves Canyon Lake, where does it go? Into New Braunfels. All of the effluent out of New Braunfels goes into the Guadalupe River. And then it comes right here and goes right through the middle of Seguin. And so please don't be afraid of effluent. It's not going to harm you at all. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying effluent?
Effluent?
Is that a disease?
E-F-F-L-U-E-N-T. It's treated
Oh,
sewage.
discharge. That's the definition.
Sewage.
Discharge of sewage water is effluent.
So it's already treated and it's
It has been treated and purified to the point where they can put it back in the water system.
Tubing out the well.
Here's another piece that's going to be coming at you. I'll get your question in just a second. Here's another piece that is really kind of cool about what's happening. That water that has been going in there in effluent is going to be treated in New Braunfels and re-entered into the drinking water system, not just the drainage system. That's called toilet to tap, and Stephen's going to talk about that. Go ahead, sir.
I don't know if I want to hear this.
Water, have a degree of water, wastewater, and the water that actually comes out of the wastewater plant is purer than the water that's going into.
That's obviously very, very true. And so I'm going to get into when you get rid of the yuck factor, it's going to be okay, and Steve's going to talk more about that. I'm going to blame him for everything that's going to happen with that. Now, let's then take your jurisdiction again. This is your Groundwater Conservation District's jurisdiction. And so from there, here's all of the roads that go every which way. And what I'd like you to do is kind of pick out wherever you happen to be on that map. And I'll take the street, the roads away. And once we do that, let's put in the wells. These are all of the test wells that your Groundwater Conservation District has and what has happened to them in the recent past. And so from January of 24 to January of 25, the well that's right there has gone up 5 feet. That one has gone up about 5 feet. This one right over here has gone down 12 feet. So that's where the wells are having their action. The ones that are the weakest are right over here in this area, and I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. Most of the wells are between 300 feet deep and 700 feet deep. And this one right over here, Vogel I think it is only 90 feet deep. However, the one that is right over there, that one is 1,600 feet deep.
Struck any oil?
I'm sorry?
They struck any oil?
And you have to go a lot deeper than that in order to hit oil. And so, on the average, what we have is we have an increase of 38 feet in that well right there. Wow. And so that's actually doing pretty well at that depth. But most of you are not going that deep in your system. The good news for you is that your system is relatively stable. That is, the wells are not, the water table is not dropping rapidly, much less than the Trinity aquifer, which is dropping terribly fast. And so you're only losing 1.8 feet from January of 24 to January of 25, whereas in the same time frame on the Trinity, they've gone down 7.5 feet in that same time period. And so in the long term, you're losing about one half a foot per year in your aquifer. And that's a very good thing. And so that means that if you drill a well, your well is going to last somewhere around 150 years from the time that was drilled. All right. So from there, yes, ma'am.
Where can we find information about this, just to learn
on your aquifer, your Carrizo, Wilcox, your area here, they have all of that data. Okay. And they are very willing to share it with you, by the way. Sometimes when we have come to make presentations, they will come and sit in and then answer some of those questions. But they are very knowledgeable, and you have one of the best. And I say that because I served on the board of the Camel Trinity Groundwater Conservation District for 8 years. And I can tell you that you have one of the best, truly. Yes, ma'am.
So theoretically, that well that you said was doing so-so, that was like 90 feet. Theoretically, shouldn't the water return to it faster if you had, what was it, like 2 to 3 years? Like you get like, I don't know, like 1.5 to 2 years at 90 feet, I don't know. Like how come that well is doing
It's
more?
only because, see, the water table, sometimes when we think of the water table, we think of it being flat like a lake,
Okay.
and it's not. It undulates underground, and so sometimes the water is higher in one area and lower in another. You might go a half a mile and be able to hit water at 90 feet, whereas a half a mile away, you have to go 450 feet. And that's because of the
It could be in a
undulation.
high part of the undulation at 90 feet, which now is lower.
Yep.
Got it.
Exactly. Great questions, thank you. And let me turn it over to that handsome, you're probably wondering why with faces that look this good, we cover them with hair.
I don't wonder at all.
Well, Larry, I've had several comments today about my hat. And I just want to say, you know, I'm a proud Aggie. March for the Egg band, you know, lots of good things. But, you know, taking off on what he just said, I wear the hat because I haven't turned gray up here yet. It's just started. And I don't want to upstage my partners. But I am the youngster. I only 70 about gray hair. I would like a lot more gray hair. Right. I'm only 75, so I'm just a kid on the team. When I say I'm the kid on the team, the last time I gave this talk, I said I went to high school with Ben. But that won't play now. I kind of washed that out. It has been a problem since we started settling this country. You know, there are certain resources that you just have to live. You know, and we've seen places that just fell apart, the civilizations that have collapsed because they ran out of water. And so there's a lot of change about my portion of this presentation because the public is becoming hyper-aware of our water situation. So it's not like 3 years ago when I give this talk and people would go, I didn't know that. Everybody already knows it. So we're not, my part of the talk is probably quite different than it was 3 years ago. And when we talk about water, it's not just this part of the state, it's all of the state. West of, I'd say, College Station. And then it's really a problem in the western half of the United States. Well, it's also a problem in the Amazon now, believe it or not, they're having a drought in the Amazon. They don't have roads in Brazil, they have rivers. And that's how they get from one place to another. The rivers have gone dry, and people are just cut off. They have to walk to get to the next community. Anyway, water is an issue all around the world right now. And in our part of the world, it's not so much the drought, although that exacerbates it. It's the people moving in. Our population is growing so fast.
Some damn Californians.
Right, it's...
I'm just gonna clarify that, David.
Good girl.
Well, Larry came here from California, so you know, we got lots of good folks coming in from California. And when we talk about the development, you know, we're trying to find a way to deal with that. And Tim was asking me earlier today, you guys never talk about politics in your presentation. And there's a reason for that. We don't want to get the class split up into two camps, you know, or the presentation. We don't just talk to Master Garner groups, we talk to public groups. And it's be too easy to get people moving from one side of the room to the other. And we don't want that. We want us to all recognize that we're all affected by this. And it does not matter what your political position is. Now, we watch what's happening in the legislature. We see who puts forward certain bills, and we're not going to be picking winners and choosers on the bills. It's up to the people, the public, to decide what's going to actually happen in that regard. What we want to do is educate you on the real concern. And if we educate you, then you can educate your representatives. See how that works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So now when we talk about development, hot topic in Comal County was we've got all these developments going in, we're running out of water, what are we gonna do? Well, it's finally happened that one of the major water companies in our county has said, whoa, and told 9 developments, can't go forward. We don't have a water reserve. Canyon Lake is dropping 1 inch every 3 days. Okay? So, when we look at development's impact on our water resources, it comes about from the fact that drawland, you get more percolation. And, you know, we talk about only 5% gets to the aquifer. Well, 50% will get into the immediate ground. But then some of that is taken up by the plants and go back out through the leaves. Some of it just evaporates out of the ground. Now, the runoff in a natural setting is around 10%. Well, when you start building communities, and this looks like a city, but it can also be a rural housing development. You put in streets and you've got rooftops and sidewalks, you suddenly increase the runoff and now you got a new set of problems. A lot of places around the country are now putting in tax programs based on how much runoff you create. In New Jersey, there's a tax program that says they measure your driveway, your sidewalk to your house, the footprint of your house, all of that, and then they charge you for stormwater.
Well, don't they work with the builders to prevent runoff? Or, I mean, this is all new to me, so.
Well, you can't prevent runoff, but what you can do is you can manage it. So what you see in a lot of places where they'll build those retention ponds, and the water will run off into that, fill that up, and then slowly release it so you don't have damaging stormwater loss. But one of the things, and we're going to plug on that in just a minute, if you catch the water off your roof, it's not stormwater anymore, it's rainwater in your tank, and that's a big plus. And I'll comment too that someone asked about the calcification of your drippers. If you use rainwater, that's not going to happen. Yeah. End of commercial message. All right, so if water supplies are declining, like I said, everyone's worried about Canyon Lake, but we're also worried about our aquifers over there. All of those, you say, well, we're going to get new water. Well, a lot of people talk about new water like they come up with some way to create it at a factory. That's not exactly right. So this wastewater that we've talked about, converting that's going to be the new water. Water that we used to just throw away, we're going to convert, just like we're living on the space station. We're going to take toilet water all the way back to drinking water. So let's look at what's going to happen on that. We don't want to see our water loss going into taking drinking water and throwing it on your ground around your house. We'd like to see different approach, because protecting our water resources, its cheapest route is to do conservation, meaning using it wisely. Consequently, that takes us to this point right here. Here's the hot topic. New water is going to be toilet to tap. And you're going to see processing plants that take what used to be our sewage water, and they're going to recondition it, purify it, filter it out, and bring it all the way back to drinking standards. Who's doing that? Well, in Texas, these cities have done it. In the West, those cities have been doing it, and now it's coming to San Antonio, Dallas, and New Braunfels. Yes, sir?
I have a question. If you live on the coast like San Diego, LA, and Anaheim, why would they be doing that instead of a desalinization plant?
Desalination is a little more difficult to do. We don't quite have a handle on all the technology. You hear about it being done in, say, the Middle East. Saudi Arabia does 40% or 45% of all the desalination in the world. But what was the effect of their doing that? Well, two things. They have all the oil they can use. So they've generated electricity because desalination is a real hog for electricity. On top of that, what do you do with the brine? You separate the water into two groups, drinking water and super saturated brine.
Right.
And what the Saudis did was they said, well, we'll just dump it back in the ocean. So they dumped it into the Arabian Gulf, and they killed off the fishing industry of the Arabian Gulf. That's why you have to be careful when you say, well, Corpus Christi ought to do that. They're talking about their water shortage. They're really tight on water. Why don't we do desalination? Well, the shrimpers would be very unhappy.
I can see your point.
You can't,
Because we used to
we gotta
dump it
find a useful place to put it.
Yeah.
You know, and some people have said, well, let's dump desalinate, the brine water, just pump it down into abandoned oil wells out in the Permian Basin.
Yeah.
They have been pumping water down into that basin. And guess what they have now? They have saltwater geysers. Literally, the water's coming up 10 or 15 feet in the air and polluting an area with salt water.
Wow.
Yeah, so desalination is a tricky problem to address. There are some clever approaches being studied, and we hope they come to fruition.
Thank you.
But you're absolutely right. The coastal communities, you would think they could be able to do that.
Right.
Yes. So on the toilet to tap side, you know, when we talk about the fact that we can't build any new dams, there are only 5 places in Texas that you could build another reservoir. And 3 of those have been voted down by the people that live there. They don't want their farms lost. They don't want their hunting grounds lost. So you can increase the supply, but that's very hard to do unless you go to this concept of new water. You really can't reduce the demand very much, not anymore. This is the pathway that our household appliances have taken. And for everybody that washes clothes or washes dishes, how many times do you say, that's not clean yet, and you have to run the washing machine a second time? That's why. We're using so little water on these machines, they're at the limit. They're absolutely at the limit. Toilets flushing, how many times have you had to flush twice? I mean, you know, it happens. And so our demand can't go down in our household use, I don't believe, any further than it's already gone down. Now, the real trick is let's do both. And this is our suggestion to you. You find ways to limit your use of water. That means if you have a lawn, why don't you do rainwater harvesting and water your lawn with that water? If you have a garden, do the same thing. Household landscaping, do the same thing. You're going to need to think in terms of investing in that side of your home for the future, because I think it's going to be a sales point in the future, in the next 20 years for sure, that people will look at a house on the market and they say, hey, they've got a rainwater system, which is like having a private water system for your house. And therefore, they know that their water bill is going to be less. Everybody's water bills are going to decline because the cost of water is going to go up because of the demand for it. So let's do both. Let's eliminate some of our demand. When we talk about grass, Larry and I sound like we're with the Drug Enforcement Agency, you know, the DEA. You know, he said, we want to murder the grass. We want to get rid of the grass. So 1 pallet of grass is actually about the surface area of a 2-car garage. And I cringe every time I'm sitting at a traffic light and a truck comes through the intersection carrying 10 or 15 pallets of grass, because I know what that calculates into in terms of water. You just saw 10,000 gallons per month of water demand go by. So let's take that 1 pallet and say, okay, here's a real home in Canal County. We never tell who it is or where it is, but here's a real home, and it's on a 1-acre lot. That's 43,560 square feet. People don't really need to remember that, but a lot of us do. But if you've got an HOA that says you've got to have 30% grass to live there, that means all of this area has got to be grassed. What is the water demand for that grass? Well, we're going to look at that. That's going to take 32 pallets of grass, 2 truck loads. And then let's look at our watering cycles. If you've got an irrigation system, you know what I'm talking about right here. Some months you don't have to run your system at all. Sometimes you run it a little bit, and then you start getting rain, and so it drops back because you don't water when you're getting good rain. But you get 52 cycles on this scenario per year. 52 cycles, that's 1 a week. Well, let's look at it. What would that mean for this household? We go back to our 30% and we get about 14,500 square feet. And if you're gonna put water on it, it used to be the recommended, A&M used to say 1 inch of water on grass. Well, we're getting grass species now, we're getting hybrid grass that doesn't quite require as much. So we're not talking about 0.6 inches per water, but this is the old data right here. Now, take that 52 cycles and run it across how much water that takes to put an inch on there. This is your annual demand of water for that small amount of your acreage, that 30%. Well, it's hard to envision 280,000 gallons, so let's put it in the frame of something you do recognize. You're in the gas station, you see these trucks that are loading gas into the subterranean tanks. They only carry 11,000 gallons. They look huge, but it's only 11,000 gallons. So how many trucks would it take to fill up that guy's lawn?
Dude, you got a 7,000 square foot house.
Yeah.
He can afford that.
Well, sadly, there are people that can afford it, and we've actually heard them say in open meetings, it's my money, I'll spend it how I want. If I want to have all this grass, I'm going to do it. Without thinking about the fact that by taking all that water, we have less. So there's another aspect of this. If you'll look right here, they have an 800 square foot swimming pool. Well, pools evaporate about 3.5 inches of water per week. If you take that across 4 weeks, we get a monthly loss of 6,700 gallons. Now, that goes into your water demand. Oh, let me back up. I want to show one other thing. They have a rain catchment system. We've actually done the math on this. They collect about 130,000 gallons a year. So that 130,000 gallons covers the pool and a lot of this grass back here, but it does not cover all this grass. So we have another slideshow where we talk about this. We said, murder the grass. We tell you all these areas of grass you need to go to NIPSOT and find out what you could plant in lieu of grass.
This dude's going, look, I'm doing my part, I got a rain catchment system.
Yes.
Shut up. Right?
Okay.
Even though I got this 7,000 square foot house, and I've got a pool,
Right.
and I've got a water catchment system, what more do you want from me?
Well, in this case, we say kudos for what you've done, but look at what your demand side is. And if you've got all this grass out here, you have to relinquish it.
What was that website you said to go to for what you could plant instead of grass?
NIPSOT.
NIPS?
NIPSOT stands for Native Plant Society of Texas.
Okay, but, oh, sorry.
No, okay, you want to continue?
We're closest on the earth is the earth. It's closest. That water is not going anywhere. Even if it evaporates, it's going to come back into our atmosphere somewhere.
That's true, however, I'm going to spoil your day.
Oh, good.
A lot of it's being lost into the ocean. It doesn't come back it doesn't all come back. Texas is losing 4 billion tons of water a year. It leaves the state, it doesn't come back. The reason is the prevailing winds are carrying it up through the Ohio River Valley all the way to Canada. And we're not getting makeup water out of the Gulf and out of Mexico and New Mexico. There's not as much water coming into the state now as leave the state. And it's driven by the higher temperatures we're having, and it's also driven by the fact that when we pull water from its protected zone down in the ground, and we put it up on the surface, we lose it. And so that's one of the drains on the aquifers. But that was a good question, because what we're saying is, look at your demand across your whole home and say, all right, am I catching enough to be neutral? Am I going to cover my expenditure? If you're not, then you have to look at retasking and redeveloping some of your landscape to minimize that water demand. Remember, we were striking the balance, the little balance beam? We want to balance, we want to lower the demand and we want to increase the supply.
Is it possible to do that here when there's not a lot of rain? It doesn't rain a lot here.
Right.
So how do you catch enough to neutralize it?
Well, actually, there've been rainwater systems put in some reservations, Indian reservations out in New Mexico, where they only get 3 inches a year. And they now have vegetable gardens because they did enough surface area. It's a balance between, if you don't get a lot of rain, you need a big catchment area, okay?
Because it's condensation also that you're capturing? Like, it's not just the rain coming down, you're catching it from the sitting on the surface of that big area? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you're catching it from the rain in that case, but there are some places where they actually can catch water. Like my house has a metal roof, and when there's foggy, I can hear water dripping in my gutters, dropping down into my pipe system. I can hear it, and it's not raining, but I'm collecting water.
That's a sweet sound to your ears, yes.
Right, it is a good sound. Let's see, you had a question back here.
Yeah, I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I read somewhere that like rain catchments, they can only, in some places, you can be fined or because they're too big or something like that. Do you know anything about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of that.
So rain catchments.
Yes.
They have to be a certain size, or you can't, there's a certain volume of rain that.
He's going to cover that in his section.
Okay.
He's going to talk about the relative catchment area versus the quantity of water you catch.
Well, I think she's talking about Colorado. I don't think you can put in rain systems, or there's limitations
Yes.
to what you can do in Colorado. I don't think they have any of that in Texas.
Okay.
I think you can put in whatever
You can
size.
collect,
Depends on
you
each
can
area.
collect it all here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're talking about, do we get enough rain to justify having rain catchment? Here are the stats on San Antonio. Since January 1st of 2022 until today, we're behind 45 inches in rain.
Yes.
The good news is, we got 55 that we didn't lose. So 55 inches of rain is enough to sustain a household. Now, you may not have a large landscape that you're going to water. You may have to focus on just your veggie garden or something like that. But we're not at the point where we don't get enough rain to justify having rainwater harvesting. Any other questions? Okay, well, good questions. You guys are really engaged. It's always wonderful to come over here. You guys are really good and receptive, and your hospitality is always great. Thank you. All right, and we're going to go from the paradigm shift slide where I'm going to toss these back to Larry, and he's going to show you how to implement rainwater harvesting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well done.
I get to talk about the fun stuff about harvesting rain. Typically, when we are going to gather rain, we do it for a couple of reasons. Either we're going to irrigate, or we're going to use it for animals, which is a very good use of it, or we're going to use it for household use. And so the rain harvesting process really takes those kind of steps. You're going to do one or the other kind of thing. All of it is going to be centered around this water storage container that we have there. Some of it happens before that, and what happens before we call the screening process, and what happens after it is a filtration process for some of the uses, but not all of the uses as we go through that. And so the first thing is we collect the water on a roof, and let's assume that all of these various footprints for those homes are the same size. If they are, all of those homes collect exactly the same amount of water, because the water falls straight down. So the good news is when you're calculating how much surface area that you have, you don't have to worry about calculating the hypotenuse and all of that stuff. All you need to know is how many square foot do I have of roof space. Just square foot, not square foot in terms of on the various kinds of slopes. So when we go through the rain harvesting system, there are two kinds of systems. The first one is a dry system, the second is a wet system. And so when we talk about a dry system, the rain is going to fall. When the rain falls, it hits the roof, goes into pipes and drops into the tank. And then whenever it stops raining, these pipes are dry, and so we call that a dry system. All rain harvesting systems on a tank have to have some kind of an overflow, because you can't just go outside and say, stop raining, I'm done, I'm full. And so because of that, what happens is we end up having to have an overflow. Now the difference between a wet system and a dry system is a wet system has basically the same kind of a process, except that when the rain gets down into the rain downspouts, it goes underground, then pops up, then goes over and drops into the tank. And so the important thing about this, if you're going to, this is when the tank is going to be kind of a long way from your home. And so when this happens, what you have to do is you have to have a differential of about 3 feet between the rain gutter and the top of the tank, so that when the water falls into the rain gutter pipe up at the top, it's going to take an overflow and go into the tank. You don't have to pump it. Can you pump it? Yes. You can set up a system where you can pump it, and we can help you to kind of plan that if that is the case. And that happens when the house is here, the tank has to be up in here. You got to pump it to get it up there. All right. Now, the important part is you absolutely have to have an overflow for that also, but you also need a low point clean out. Now, watch this point here. If I were to take and look at this system, the water is going to take and fall into the tank right there. And so this pipe right over here is full of water. And so is that pipe full of water all the way to that same point. That's full of water, and so is this one full of water. And if the weatherman says, hey, we're going to be less than 25 degrees tonight, well, then you got to go to a low point clean out to be able to clean out or dump the water out of the pipe, or they will freeze and they will break, because they're just PVC. So when you're thinking of the system in a wet system, you do want to take and make sure you plan for wherever the low point is going to be, so you can have a clean out for that. The big question that we get frequently is, how much water can I collect? I want you to remember the factor 0.62. Stephen has used it a couple of times in his previous. 0.62 is going to be easy for you to remember, because that's the year I graduated high school, 1962, you see? So 0.62, you're going to be able to remember that. For every square foot, you get 0.62 of a gallon. So all we have to do, calculate the square foot, and therefore we know how much water we can collect. And I'll show you how to do that in a very easy way coming up. And so if we had 1,000 square feet on our roof, we're going to collect 620 gallons. 1,000 times 0.62 is 620. And in a year, if we get about 34 inches of rain in a year, off of 1,000 square foot, we're going to collect almost about 21,000 gallons of water. In my system at my home, I have 6,000 square feet off of 2 homes, a main house, guest house. I collect that water into a 50,000 gallon storage tank that we use for potable water. Then I have 2 5,000 gallon tanks on outbuildings near the garden, and the water that gets collected there goes and services my garden. And my garden is about from here to that wall, about this much space, and I use 30,000 gallons of water on that every year in the 9-month time period that I have my garden. So let's talk about the pre-tank stuff. The stuff that happens before the water gets in the tank. First, you need rain gutters, and you need some sort of a leaf guard on top to keep the big stuff out. And that's all it does. It keeps the big stuff, the leaves and the twigs out. You do not need to buy that microfiber stuff that is very expensive in order to take and filter the water down. You don't need that. All you want to do is to take and keep the big stuff out. Because the second step of this is going to be something called a leaf guard, or a leaf eater, if you will. And this thing has a screen on it right here, and that screen is on a 45-degree angle. So any kind of particulate that gets on there gets washed away, gets down here at the bottom. About once a year I have to clean these off, and I do it right after the catkins fall out of the oak trees. So when the catkins fall, I typically go and clean that, and that's just about coming up. So around about the 1st of March is when I do that. But the other thing that this does is your mosquito protection on that end of the system. Mosquitoes will go 40 feet in a pipe to find water so that they can lay their eggs. And so you want to make sure that this is sealing that pipe on that end of the system. So that's called a leaf eater. It's a brand name. There's a whole bunch of different manufacturers. The ones I use are called leaf eaters. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes people want to take and filter the water even more before it goes into the system. And if you do, then you want to use something that's kind of like, we call it a sock filter. And we call it a sock filter because the porosity of that thing is about the same as pantyhose. And so the amount of water that goes through there, the size of particulate, is going to be about 180 microns. And so 180 micron means that if you took out one hair is 70 micron. Okay, so a micron over here, 180 micron, is about 3.5 hairs wide, if you will. That would be the pantyhose kind of situation. So, do you need this? No, you don't. I have one on one of my systems because I wanted to test it and see whether there was a difference. And I don't get a lot of difference between the two because that screen filter that we talked about earlier, that pretty much takes the particulate out of it that I need to be concerned about. And this is for, you can use it for either your garden system or your landscaping system or for your potable system. But you don't need it. It's not necessary. That thing that's right there, this thing costs about 450 bucks. And so if you wanted to take it, you can. There are certain circumstances when you can make a system with pantyhose, and I can show you how to do that, but your terrain has to be right, and I don't have time to talk about that today, but if that situation occurs where you have, let's say, house, ground, tank, then you can make one of these yourself with pantyhose, and it's not difficult to do. All right, I want to talk about first flush. If you do any kind of research about rain harvesting, one of the first things that's going to happen is you're going to find out about, well, you've got to have a first flush. Yes, you do. You ought to have one, but the ones that you're going to read about are not good. So I want you to be careful with that. So when we talk about a first flush system, the logic is wonderful. The idea is, if it has not rained for a couple of weeks, we have dust that goes up there, we have silt that goes up there, we had a bird that pooped up there, a squirrel peed up there, but there's stuff that happens on there, and rain is perfectly going to be pure until it hits something. Once it hits something, it picks up contaminants. So we want to take those contaminants out. So if it hasn't rained for a while, when it first rains, it gets washed off. And the logic is, let's take that first flush of water and let's put it through and capture it somehow. And if we can set it aside, when that ball gets to the top, the dirty water is in here, and now cleaner water is going to go into your tank. The logic is wonderful, you see. However, the people who sell those things lie to you. I know you're going to find that on YouTube. So, if you do a first flush system with a pipe, and this is the one that is most often advertised, it is terribly undersized. So, you need to collect 20 gallons per every 1,000 square feet of roof that you have. And so, if you look at this roof, if there's 1,000 square feet up there, there's no way you're going to get 20 gallons in that little bitty pipe right there, you see? Now, what the people who sell this stuff will say to you is, well, there's this little dripper thing that's right down here at the bottom, and that lets the water drip out of it. What happens to the sludge? It's still in there. You see it, it clogs it up, and then it doesn't work, and because it doesn't work, you might not even have it there, you see? So the logic of it is that these things, number one, are undersized, but secondarily, they're a maintenance chore because you have to clean out every one of them, and you have to have one of those on every single downspout. If you've got 9 of them, you've got a pain in the asparagus. So you've got to have one on each downspout, and then the final thing is that you have to clean them periodically. About every 3rd rainstorm, you got to do that. Well, the guy who puts in your rain gutter, he says, you know what? You ought to take and clean out that rain gutter every year. Who does that? Nobody does that. And so because we don't do it, you're not going to do that either. And because we're not going to do it, it's not going to work. Now, am I telling you not to do a first flush? No, I'm not. But I think there's a better way. And the better way is the first flush on a tank system. And so here we got a wet system where the water is coming along in here, it goes up this pipe, and once it gets to this level, it'll drop into this tank. And this tank can be any size as long as it's 20 gallons per 1,000 square feet. I told you I have 6,000 square feet, so I need...
Was that your house?
No, well, yes it is. Right.
The other one.
No, not the other one, no. I'll talk about my house later on. But if we have time. So how many, I have 6,000 square feet, so how big does this tank have to be? 120 gallons, right? My tank is 550 gallons. Now you say, that's overkill. Yes, it is, but I don't pump it all out. What I do is I will take in, whenever this water gets in here, let me finish that part. Whenever the water gets in here and it fills up, then it bypasses and goes into the tank. The cleaner water, the dirtiest water is in here. But in my system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and use it in my garden. So I take that water right there and I pump it down 200 gallons. And then I put my water-soluble fertilizer in there, mix it up, and every 3 weeks I water my garden. It's important that you water and fertilize your garden about every 3 weeks. So I use that much water because I can pump it out of there, you see? So I don't waste any of that water, but when the next rainfall is going to happen, I have this space available for that dirtiest water to take and fall into my system. And so then, very little maintenance to this system at all. I don't ever have to do anything except pump the water out. And could I use this water out of a hose and just use it to water my garden? You bet. I cannot put it through a drip system because it would clog up the emitters, you see? But I could use it in a hose because it doesn't matter. And the plants don't care if a bird pooped in it, you see? And so the point about it is, a first flush system is a good system, but be careful what you put in. All right, so now let's take and get from there to storage containers. We have several different kinds of storage containers. Some of them are metal, some of them are wood. There are all kinds of them. Whatever you have available for you, whatever fits into your budget, use that. Typically, if you want a plastic tank, your limit is 5,000 gallons. If you use a metal tank, such as those kinds of tanks, a metal tank, you can go all the way up to 100,000 gallons of water. And somebody was talking about, well, we haven't had a whole lot of rain lately. I have a 50,000 gallon tank, and we have 3 people living on our property. And my tank right now is 40,000 gallons in it, right now. And so we collect water all the time. Like what Stephen was saying, if it's misty outside, you collect that water. And so we think of water in terms of raindrops instead of the huge volume that comes off of your home. And I'm going to get more into that in just a second. So the tanks, all of us are going to have some kind of a tank, doesn't matter. If you're going to be storing it in these various barrels, be very careful about how much elevation you put on your barrel. Sometimes people want to raise it up because I'm going to get more pressure in order to get that pressure out of the system. If you go more than about 16 inches high, it's very dangerous. Now, when you look at these have got cables that go over the top, and you think, well, that's pretty solid. But if that thing tips over onto a child, this is a ton. That's a ton of water. And that's very, very dangerous. So be careful about how high you put your tank. All right, so post-tank. Let's talk about, now this is after the water comes out of the tank. Remember I said you don't need a sock filter in the beginning? Well, because you don't need it because you can filter it when it comes out. And most people will take and use that effort rather than the maelstrom filter that we talked about earlier. So you need some kind of a pump, and that pump is going to take and pump water and it's going to go into your system. And typically what happens is, just like a well, you need some sort of a pressure tank that's going to help that pump not cycle as rapidly as it would otherwise do. If I didn't have this is going to cycle, let's say as I'm doing my drip irrigation in my garden, this is going to cycle maybe 30 times. But if I have that, it's gonna cycle only about 7 times. And so you save the life of your pump by having that. So you would think about in your system, plan on putting that in the system. So now the water takes and goes up, and it goes out to your garden or to landscaping, and folks, that's all you need. You don't need any other filtration unless you're going to do the richer thing and do drip irrigation. And if you're going to do drip irrigation, then you want to put in a filter. I use a 20 micron filter in mine because I have a drip system, thanks to Richard. And he didn't do mine, but he gave me a lot of good information. And so I use a 20 micron filter, and it sits in there, and the water comes in, the water goes out, and it goes to my garden to a drip system. Now, some of you are going to say, wait a minute, I thought you used the wicking tubs. I thought you had a bunch of these wicking tubs. I have 81 of them. I have 81 of those suckers. And there's a pipe sticking up that I have to fill. Can you imagine this? You get the net, that's why I have the drip system. Because I have 81, and I have 81 in my garden, but blackberries, I have 115 of those in blackberries. Talk more about that as we get further. All right, so this is the system that you're going to use if you're going to have animals or landscaping. If you're going to go to potable water, and this is only for potable water, then the system is a little different. You still need the pump, and it's still going to take and go through that pressure tank, but now it's going to go through filtration. The filtration that you need looks like that, and you can buy that on a board that's 4 foot by 4 foot, hanging on a wall, connect the water going in, connect the water going out, and you're done. That cost of that is about $1,500.
Is that reverse osmosis?
That's not reverse osmosis, this is filtration. An RO system is a little different. Those of you who have an RO system, this is something to kind of remember. For every 1 gallon that you get out of an RO system, you lose 4 gallons. 4 gallons goes down the drain because it's cleaning the system. That's true. Now, if you have one and you're on post and beam, well, you can take that water and pipe it down to something underneath and pump it out. You can use that water. It's 4 gallons for every gallon you get out of that little spout. Truly. All right, so for this filtration system, you can buy that for about $1,200 to $1,500, and what makes the difference is the size of the UV filter. If this is 8 gallons per minute, if I had 12 gallons per minute, it'd be down to about here, and therefore the difference in that estimated price. Now, what are the components? First thing we have are some pressure gauges. We have a pressure gauge of the water going in and a pressure gauge of the water going out. If this one, the water's flowing, if this one right over here is lower than that one, well, then I've got a blockage in here and I've got to change my filters. You see, these filters get changed about every quarter. Now, in addition to that, the first filter is a 20 micron filter. Remember, a hair is 70 micron. Then the next filter is a 5 micron filter. And after that, it goes to a UV filter, which is not a filter at all, it's a sanitizer. And the only reason that it exists is to neutralize pathogens. It does not kill them, the germs, and it does not take them out of the water. It only renders them inert, so they cannot reproduce. And if they can't reproduce, they can't hurt you, you see? And so what the purpose of this is that there's a light bulb, and the water's going around the light bulb. Now, here's an example. I'm going to take and blow this up because there's a very important point here. I'm going to blow it up this big. There's a light bulb here in the middle. The water comes in, and the water is circulating around that light bulb. And if there are any germs in there, they get hit by the light, and they're rendered inert. But let's suppose that in that water, instead of having a 5 micron filter here, we only have a 20 micron. And a piece of dirt goes through there, that's 15 micron. Same picture, there's a piece of dirt, and there's the germ. And if the germ can stay in the shadow, it doesn't get hit by the light. And therefore, it can't be rendered inert, you see? So what happens is we go to a 5 micron because at a 5 micron the shadow is so small germs can't hide. So the 5 micron in your system is important. Now some people say, well, can I use just the 5 micron? Well, yeah, you could, but you'd be changing it about every 25 days. instead of once a quarter, you see? You need this one to take the particulate out, that's the big stuff. This takes out the smaller stuff. You still have to change these two things every quarter. So you put it on your calendar, and every quarter you unscrew put in the new cartridge. Go to Home Depot, they cost about $19 to $29. There's a guy in Wimberley who sells the filters, $6. I buy them from Wimberley. All right. Now, sometimes people say, well, how about that? How often do you have to change that? This is really kind of important, folks. You have to change that light bulb in there every year, no matter what. Even if it's on, because it's not the fact that the light is on that makes a difference. What makes the difference is the intensity of the bulb. And over time, the intensity of that UV light gets to be less and less and less. It'll come on, but it's not strong enough to render them inert. So you want to change that every year. It costs about $82. I just bought one. So that's, and I have a 12. So mine is a 12 gallon per minute. 8 gallons per minute will work fine for anything 3 bathrooms or fewer. If you have 4 bathrooms or more, you want to go to a 12. I don't go with an installer who does 8s. Everybody does 12s. So you get your choice. All right, so that's going to go in the system there. And we've already talked about you need the pressure tank. The pressure tank is to save the pump over time. And the water then goes in and goes out and you're done. And that is the entire system. That's all you need. Now, I'm lazy. I'm admitting that. I'm lazy. I don't want to have to change these two suckers every single quarter because the quarter comes around too fast for me. So for my system, what I did is I put in a spin-down filter. And a spin-down filter, the water goes in, spins around this thing, and particulate gets caught in here. And that little filter in there is 60 micron, which takes away the vast majority of the bigger particulate. And whenever I get particulate in this little bowl that's right over here, I open that valve for about 4 seconds and it's gone. And because I have that in my system in line like that, I change these two filters every 1.5 years. So I like the spin-down filter. It's easy for me. I have people come to my home all the time. In fact, one of the classes that was here, were you with the group that came from here that came to my house? The whole class, everybody in the class came to my house and went through my system and I showed them all the entire system. And so I put that in there because I simply did not want to take and have to change it so frequently. Now, some of you might say, well, I'd like to know how much water I'm using. So if you do, then you get a water meter. The water meter costs about $70. And so you put that in line, and once it's in line, then that tells you how much water that you're going to use. Now, I made this drawing and said that if you're pumping out of here, you don't need to have the stuff that's going to your garden going through filtration. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. And Stephen made the comment, well, wait a minute, this doesn't tell you the total amount of water that you're using because it's before the meter. So you got to put it over here. And so yes, you could do that. You could take it, move it over there, and now you know your total water output. So whether you decide that you're going to take and put that over here in this kind of a configuration, or whether you're going to put it in that kind of configuration is kind of your choice. My point about it is, if you want to know how much water you're using, you got to have a little bit of a water meter. And they're not expensive, so it's not a big deal. All right, so now let's talk about how much water we can collect. First, whenever you buy a house or you're going to have one built, they'll say you've got X number of square feet. That X number of square feet is air-conditioned space. It typically does not include patios, and it does not include whatever you have as a garage if it's an attached garage. And so let's say that this is going to be that many square feet because we don't have a garage. And inside of that red dotted line is 1,700 square foot. But if you think about it, around that house, we've got a 2-foot overhang of that roof all the way around. And that's an additional 20% of roof over your slab. So that's going to be 20% more. So for us to calculate that, all we've got to do is to take the 1,700 square feet, multiply it by 1.2. And that means that that house, 1,700 square foot house, actually has 2,000 square feet of roof space, you see? And then the factor that we're going to use to multiply that was .62, yep, 1962. So .62, for us to calculate it out of there, the 2,000 square feet times .62 gives me 1,265 gallons in 1 inch of rain. Then multiply that by your annual rainfall, and in our area we get typically 34 when we don't have a drought. We have a 34-inch rainfall, and therefore end up with 43,000 gallons. At my house, I collect 268,000 gallons of water every year. 268,000 gallons.
How much do you use in a year?
About 3/4 of that. So my tank has actually overflowed. My 6,000 gallon tank is overflowed. And so the next question and the next thing is that usage. How much do you have for usage, and how do we figure that? First, we use 50 gallons per day per person inside of our home. So if you have 3 people living in your home, that means that we're going to take 50 gallons times 3 is going to be 150 gallons of water per day for the family. Now, after that, we would say, okay, that's per day. How much do I use in a month? Well, we have to take and multiply the 150 gallons times 30 days, and that's going to give us 4,500 gallons in a month. That's your total usage inside your home. And so once you know that, then any of the water that's going through your system is going somewhere, and it's not inside your house, it's going outside somewhere. And so you can calculate that, and I'll show you another little quick way of doing that in a second. The point that I want to make is that in this part of Texas, we have never had more than 187 days in succession with no rain whatsoever. Never. That happened in the 1940s and 50s. The early 1940s and 50s, we had a serious drought that lasted 10 years. We're in this one now for 3.5 years. The point about that is because you do not have more than 90 days with no rain, what we would suggest is you have 3 times that amount in reserve. It's kind of like a savings account. So you put that in a reserve so that you have it when the drought is going to be here. And so we would suggest 3 months. And so therefore, 3 times 4,500 gallons is going to be 13,500 gallons. And so we would recommend a 15,000 gallon tank. 15,000 gallon tank is going to be 19 feet diameter and 7 feet tall in a metal tank. Can you get a plastic tank that big? And the reason why is not because they don't make them or can't make them, but they can't get them down the road because they're too big. See, they were wider than what you need. It costs you a fortune to bring a 10,000 gallon tank down the road.
How much does a tank like that cost?
How much does a tank like that cost? A 30,000 gallon tank installed on your prepared slab is approximately $17,000. 30,000 gallon tank. I don't install them, I don't sell, I'm 81 years old, I'm not doing that stuff anymore. And so I don't sell anything, I don't try to get you to buy anything, and we're not going to try to talk you into anything. But as I'll tell you later, we'll come to your house, and we'll help you plan your system.
How can you do that if you live in an HOA?
How can you do that if you live in an HOA? First, HOAs cannot prevent you from harvesting water or having a compost pile. It's against the law for them to do that. However, HOAs can give you some recommendations or some rules that you have to follow about shielding it. So sometimes they'll say you got to have it behind a fence, or sometimes it can't be seen from the street. So the HOA cannot prevent you. It's a state law. But what they can do is they can make it really inconvenient for you if you have a very difficult person to work with. In one area that I know of in Comal County, the HOA requires a concrete block wall around it, up most of the wall in the desert. And they do that to prevent people from doing it. That'll get challenged by a court case in no time at all. But the point I want to make, HOAs cannot stop you.
Okay.
All right, so here's another way of you finding out how much water you're using inside and how much you're using outside. If you're on public water, you get a bill, and the bill tells you how many gallons you're getting every single month. So all you got to do is calculate the average. You put all that stuff together and calculate that that's the average. And now we know that inside of our house, we got 3 people they're using 50 gallons per day, and therefore it's 4,500 gallons, you see? And so we know that that's how much is going inside of your house, but that's how much we're getting billed for. So where's the rest going? Well, it's going somewhere, and it's going outside somewhere. It's not inside your home. It might be the swimming pool, it might be for grass, it might be for trees, it might be for animals, but it's not for inside your house. And so those 7,000 gallons are outside somewhere. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, I got a pool. How much for the pool? Well, remember that 0.62 for the pool. All we have to do is get the surface area of the square footage, because that's the part that can evaporate, you see, the surface area. It doesn't matter how many thousands of gallons the pool is, how deep it is, what matters is the surface area. So we take the 15 times 25 and we get 375 square feet. Multiply that by the year I graduated high school, and that gives us how much we have in 1 inch of evaporation. But they lose 3.5 inches per week. So then we multiply that times 3.5, and then times 4 weeks in a month, and now we know that we have 3,256 gallons going into our pool. And so if we combine those numbers, the 4,500 and the 3,000 gallons, that means we've got 7,000 gallons total that's going to our demand. The rest is going outside.
How do you figure if you are well?
Great question. Peggy's question is, how do you figure this if you're in a well? If you're in a well, you can't really figure anything about this unless you put in a water meter.
That's right.
You have to put in a water meter.
Okay.
But as a water meter, as I mentioned to you, it's only 75 bucks, so it's not a big deal. I mean, it's not terribly expensive. But you do have to put it in line someplace so that you're getting your water. And you can get them, they're very simple. You go online and get them from Amazon. But all you need to do is have it anywhere in line before you have the branches that go to wherever they go. All right. So from that, let me take and close my portion to talk a little bit about what Stephen and I do. First of all, we will come to your home. And yes, we do come out here. It's about an hour drive. For me, it's about an hour. For both of us, it's about an hour and a half total for us to get here. We will come to you and your house and help you set up your system, help you plan your system. Where should the tank go? How do I get the water to the tank? How do I get the water back from the tank? We will help you to do that. How do I get the pipes to go over there? And is there an easy way of doing that? We will try to help you to do that. In addition to that, you are welcome to come to my home and see my system. I have 2 systems. I have a wet system and a dry system. One is for potable water, one is for my garden, my landscape. And so you're welcome to take and come there individually, or come as a group, I don't care. And if you come as a group, we divide into 3 different groups, and then Stephen takes one, I take one, and Dredge takes the other one. So you can do that at our home. This is Reggie right over here. Joe lives right near us. All 4 of us do this consulting with people at their home. We don't sell anything. We don't try to get you to buy anything. What we do is absolutely free. Stephen is sponsored by the Kamel Master Gardeners, and he serves on the board. He took my place on the board of the Kamel Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. They also host me and Reggie. All of us are trained in this system, so we know basically we can give you advice about how it can go, and it's absolutely free. Now, beyond that, let me take you to our website. If you go to rainbees.com, this is the website, and if you have a business card, we laid one out there with you to each one. You'll notice on the back there's a free ticket. It's not good for anything, it's just free. And so, on this system, what I'd like to point out to you is, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that you can explore, but I want to talk about this one. It's right over here. It says gardening right over there, and if you push on gardening, you're going to get Master Gardeners, drip irrigation, wicking gardening, and rain barrel. So if you push Master Gardeners, you're going to get a page that's about Master Gardeners, obviously Comal County, because that's where we live. And then if you push it on drip irrigation, you're going to get the system that Richard has. In fact, there's the picture that he had of all of the stuff on his system. And so that's drip irrigation. The next one is on wicking gardening. And if we push wicking gardening, there's an explanation of how wicking garden works. We're going to talk about that after we take the next break. and then we're gonna build a wicking container and a rain barrel. And the last one is rain barrel, and when you push that, you'll get the direction for how to build a rain barrel. That's all on our website. Now, the important one, this is the one I want to take and have you emphasize, is right over here, it says sources. And if you hover over that, you're going to get two choices, calculators and sources. And if you click on calculators, you're going to get a whole bunch of different calculators about stuff, how to calculate the volume. There's even one on there that is a spreadsheet that is for animal use. If you want to figure out your demand for animals. You just take and put in the yellow circle or the yellow boxes. I have 17 cows, 4 horses, 3 sheep, and 87 chickens. And it'll tell you how much water that you need per month to be able to take and deal with that demand. So there are calculators in there that are kind of useful to you. And the last one, the important one, is this one that says sources. And if you click on sources, you're going to get 3 choices. This one in the middle is just general information about rain harvesting. There's the difference between the wet and the dry system that we already talked about. This one over here, sourced items, are items I purchased for my system, where I got them, and what they cost me 3 years ago when I put my system together. So that just kind of gives you some idea where you can find this stuff and what kind of system were typical, or items were typical in the system. This one over here is an Excel spreadsheet, and that Excel spreadsheet has a listing of people who sell stuff. And so these are people who either install or sell. They're by categories. You have what they do as a service, who they are, contact people, address if I know it, and then telephone numbers, email addresses, or website. That is all on there, and if I click it again, it's going to take and scroll up, and there's going to be a bunch of more stuff there. And that is 4 pages long, and at the bottom of that is 1 page that has a little diagram that talks about the average rainfall per month. And ironically, truly, in normal rainfall time periods, we get over 1.5 inches every single month. We get 7 inches during May and June, 6 inches during September and October. And so that helps you to be able to plan your system as you go through the system. And so that's all I know, and hopefully I haven't made you feel like that. Okay, so what kind of questions can we answer before we go in another 10-minute break? Ooh, good, I hit it right on the money.
You have too much time on your hands to make out that 4-page thing.
I update that every quarter, by the way.
Wow.
If we get a report from somebody who said, you know, I hired them and they did this wrong. We had one guy who was on the list who was supposed to be installing the system. It should have taken 3 weeks. He bid it at 4 weeks. 4 months later, he was not done. He's not on the list anymore. So that's my point. Yes, ma'am.
For someone who doesn't, I'm learning all about this seems so overwhelming, like, to even follow. Where would you start? For someone in the beginning, I have the HOA, I have a yard, I'm supposed to want to put a bed together, but I would like to feel like, I'm just like, wow, this is a lot.
Okay, Dominique's question is, where would I start? If I don't know anything about this, it becomes information overload, and it truly does. Where would I start? I would start by just contacting us on the phone, and then we will come to your home and help you kind of think through it and walk through it. You want a system that's going to be meeting your demand. So the first thing that we would ask you is, what do you want to use the water for? And then after that, how much water, what is your demand? How much water do you need? Then the third question is, how much water can we get off that roof? And then we will think through that with you and write it all down on a piece of paper and give it to you when we're done, so that you have an idea of where I can be. In Richard's systems, Richard tells, and I think very well, that you should start small and kind of build up. When you're thinking about a rain system, you want to plan the rain system, the rain harvesting system, such that you're going to have, you're able to meet your demand. And so getting to that demand is the important part. You can't just have, if you have a 55-gallon drum in the rain barrel, and I love rain barrels, They're very good for putting together something that you're going to use on your porch or whatever. But if you're going to take and try to water your lawn out of a rain barrel, well, it's going to fill up in about 10 minutes and it's going to empty in about 5 minutes. And so you're not going to get very much in the way of volume out of it. So calculating your demand is really the critical part.
Thank you, that helps.
Somebody else has a question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the different types of water that I can access on my property. When the person that came up and put in the Halo soft water system finished walking me around to all of my spigots outside, and he said that some of the water is coming directly from the city, some of the water is going through the soft water system. And he was saying, don't use the water for these spigots, but use the water for these spigots, or this water, and you just want to use this for your plants. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Lynn's question is, when you're looking at your system and the water is coming in, some spigots that you might have might be going through your water softener and some might not be going through your water softener. And how do you identify which one is which? Identifying that if all of the pipes are inside the wall is really difficult. But that said, if some of you have a water softener. If you have a water softener, it takes a certain amount of salt. And when you take a shower, you kind of feel slippery, if you will. So one of the ways that you can tell which spigot it is just put soap on your hands and put the water, let it drain, and then rinse off your hands. Do they still feel slippery? If they do, it's softened water. And if they don't, then it's not softened water, assuming that your water softener is working correctly. But for your plants, it's preferable that it is hard water, that it is not softened water. But it's also cheaper. That's the point, that you don't have to buy the salt to purify the water. So all public water is hard water because some of it comes from wells. Like in the case of the Texas Water Company in Comal County, they get 36% of their water from ground wells. And so their hardness factor is about 16 to 18. If you got water from Straw's Water Company out of San Antonio, it's at about 18. So water, the hardness factor. My well, as an example, is only 12. My brother's well on the north side of Canyon Lake, near where Stephen lives, his hardness factor is 100. So he has very hard water.
How do you know?
You can feel it. One of the easiest way of finding out how much hard water you have is to call any water purveyor who sells the water softeners. They will try to sell you theirs. You want to know how hard it is. They will come and take a test and they'll put in the drops until it turns clear and they'll say it's going to be such and such. Or you can go to Home Depot and you can buy the kit for $10 to do it yourself. And it's really a simple kit. And all you do is you let the water go for a little while, you catch the water, and then you take the purple material and you go drip, drip, drip. You count how many drips there are until the water's clear. Once the water's clear, then the number of drips equals hardness. So it's pretty easy.
You want to wash your car and you want to use your car.
Yes. That's a good point. Question over there.
How do the various tanks fare over the winter? Do you have to worry about...
Over the winter?
Yeah, with freezing.
Okay, Lindsay's question has to do with how do the tanks fare over the winter? If you have a tank that is, let's say, a 5,000 gallon tank, 250,000 gallon tank, 50,000 gallon tank, the water inside will not freeze. What can freeze is the pipes that come out. So if you have an area and you don't want to take and have to cover the pump, then you want to do a submersible pump inside of the tank. It will never freeze. And those in submersible pumps, they will last about 30 years. Exterior pumps like the one that I showed you pictures of lasts about 7 to 10 years. So you don't have to worry about it freezing in cold temperatures. I have a tank, a plastic tank at my home that has been there for 23 years, and it has never moved. It's in direct sunlight every single day. It's a black tank manufactured by Norwesto Company. Never had a problem with it. Yes, sir.
If you're using a small recirculating pump, it doesn't cost as much, but it'll still get the same, but as long as the water is moving at a certain rate, you won't freeze in the pipes.
Yeah, you can have a circulation system where sometimes back in the Midwest, people used to say, well, open your valve so it's dripping, and if it's dripping all night long, the water is continually moving and therefore it won't freeze. Don't depend upon that. Okay? I mean, I'm serious like to be, folks, don't depend upon that. But whatever you have in terms of pipes outside, you want to make sure that they are insulated. And so that you're not going to have that freezing that's going to take place. And in my system, I have just a little pump house. In the pump house, I have two incandescent light bulbs that I turn on, and it's an insulated one, but I never had any freezing.
Paul asked a question, pointed out that everything you do in terms of rainwater harvesting is sales tax free. And on our website, you can find that form. You can download, print it, and fill it out. And when you go to buy your materials, if you're going to do purchasing yourself, then you go to their desk and you say, I'm buying rainwater harvesting stuff. It's on a state form. You have it all filled out, and they should accept it. You may have problems with some of the big box stores. Let's say, for instance, Home Depot. I'm not picking on them. Some Home Depots will walk it through manually, and they'll provide it. They'll say the material with no sales tax. Others won't. And the reason is that the software is written in Georgia, and they don't see Texas law. Okay? And the store managers are really encouraged not to make deviations like that. So it just depends on whether you get a store manager that says, I understand, and he'll go with you. If you go to a mom and pop shop locally, they don't have a problem doing it because they're not tied nationwide.
It's on the front page of our website. So if you go to the front page of the website, lower right-hand corner, it's going to take you right there, and you can take and see that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. It might be for Stephen. What's the significance when you're on the highway and you see the signs entering Edwards Aquifer Recharge? Is that like that? Why do they post that? I'm just curious.
The recharge, I used to tell the joke that you're not getting close to a Tesla's charging station. The recharge zone means when you're entering the recharge zone, they're just advising you to know that don't spill things on the ground that you don't want in your drinking water later.
I don't think the general public understands that. Just
No,
the
they don't.
statement.
Or care.
They really don't.
Yeah.
And
Like,
they're trying to get the
always
word
like,
out.
oh, that's nice. I don't know what that means, you know, but that's
one of
too
the
bad.
reasons why we talk about it in here, about the recharge zone, so that folks get an idea. I mean, most people don't know.
No.
The water just goes along the ground, pops in the hole, and it's there. Drinking water today. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and at the end of the 10-minute break, then we're going to take and do some construction on some things, so we'll set out right on the break. Break time. Rainwater. All right. Thank you very much for coming back. We're going to take and start out with Stephen showing you how to build a rain barrel. When we finish with that, we'll build a couple of wicking tubs. And so with all of that, okay, sir.
All right, I'm going to have some audience participation on this. So we'll start by simply saying what you're going to do is these drums, if you want a food grade drum, you want it to be colored, you don't want a white drum because it lets light through, and then you'll have algae inside of the barrel. So you want a blue barrel or a dark colored barrel. Now, we're going to follow what is Texas A&M's AgriLife standard design feature. There are ways that you can modify this. If you want to freelance it, that's okay too. But this is going to be the standard way that AgriLife teaches it. There are 3 holes that you're going to drill. You're going to drill an input hole on the top, which is a 6-inch hole. This is the piece that I drilled out. And you would be using a hole saw that's a 6-inch hole saw. Now, if you want, I'm just going to recommend that your association buy one of these and let everybody borrow it.
Yep.
Okay, because these are about 85 bucks.
Yes, they are.
Okay?
I have one, y'all need one?
Okay, and if you know somebody, that's even better. All right, so pretend that I had drilled that one out, and here's the piece that came out. Now, you're going to need this for this little simple approach. We're going to build a screen because this hole will actually contain, we'll get those. these baskets are designed to keep critters out of your barrel. Okay, these are just standard 1 gallon nursery pots. And they have holes in the bottom. Can you see those? Through the bottom? Okay. And so we're going to cut a piece of window screen that'll fit in here. And it will be a little bit of a filter in case some debris comes out of your rain gutter, because you're not going to be filtering it like a full-blown rain harvesting system. You're just going to let it come down in the gutter and hit in here, and you're going to have this down in the bottom. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is take a piece of window screen, and we'll put a couple of clamps on it to hold it in place. You want to make sure that it hangs over the edge all the way around. Okay, and now somebody is good with scissors, just trim it up, all the way around it. And when you're done with that, we'll put it in this. Now, while we're waiting for that part of the project to go, I'll explain about the overflow. You can see one's already installed right here, but these are the components that go in there. You drill a 2-inch hole, again with another hole saw, this size.
I got one of those too.
Good deal. Once you drill the hole, you simply push the threaded part through the hole. You reach in through the 6-inch hole, and you can screw the end on. So I'll let you practice screwing the saw. Now, you can put it on either way. It doesn't matter which way you put it on. So I'll let y'all play around with that too.
Hey, Steve?
When you
You want to tell them about reversing the big, the big one, reversing it?
Oh, in terms of it getting the plug?
Yeah.
No, that part.
The big one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that sometimes the piece gets stuck in there?
Right. Well, no, the bits, you want to go in reverse.
Oh, okay, yes. Because this plastic will melt pretty easily, and because when you, and I don't use a battery-powered drill for this vehicle because the load requires more horsepower. So I use a corded drill for this. And what Richard was talking about was when you start drilling, as soon as this centering bit passes through, then these teeth will grab this whole surface, and it'll really put a torque on you. So you have to really be holding it tightly. Once it grabs, then reverse the drill, run it in the opposite direction, and these teeth will drag over the plastic. It'll melt it. You just keep pressing and it will melt its way down through it, and it will make a cleaner hole and also be more controllable for you, the user. Because when you keep trying to bite into it, you're fighting a lot of torque. Okay? So that's what Richard was talking about in terms of reversing the drill direction. Now, going back to this hole here, the side that you put it on is dependent upon where you want your drain to go. For instance, conceptualize it this way. Here's my house. And I'm going to put the barrel against the house with a 6-inch hole against the house, because that's where my gutter is. So now do I want my overflow to go that way or that way? Okay, and if you want it to go the other way, you don't drill the hole on this side, you put it on this side. Now, how do you decide how far down to go? Well, I'd say about that much. I was a design engineer on the space shuttle program, but it's not rocket science to put one of these together. I got to tell you, it's not rocket science. All things are just approximations. There's no real magic to it. You put this down far enough that you get away from the bulkhead structure of the barrel. There's a real thick section right there. You want to get just far enough down that you're just going through the barrel wall. Okay? Now, we have our piece done, and I like to tell folks that they have use for this even beyond doing the window screen. You could use this in the bottom of a pot. You could drill some holes it makes a really good drainage spacer to go down in a potted plant. Tease my wife, says you make earrings out of it. Anyhow, you'll find a use for it. I've even seen it used as a wind chime clap. So now that you've got this round, up here, this round with the screen, it fits right down in the bottom. You get it centered up. You're going to cover all the holes. Take my hands away. And then you put a second one on top. Now when you slide this up underneath the rain gutter, and you've got the gutter partly into it, then fill up the rest of it with gravel. And that'll keep squirrels from trying to get in there, or mice, or field varmints, whatever you've got in your particular environment, okay? Keeps them from getting in here, because the worst thing in the world is to have a dead rat in your tank. This is not good. I just was talking with a lady in Dripping Springs that had a rat get into her first flush. And she couldn't understand why everything stunk so bad. Okay, now, we have, we're going to take this out temporarily because I'm going to have to turn the barrel over on its side. We've got one more hole to drill. I'm going to show you that over here. Coming back. The one that I passed around, is it still going around?
It should be right here.
That's all right, I'm just going to undo this one and show you. Oh, I can do it without taking it out. This is your 2-inch line that you're going to have for your drain line. You buy whatever pipe you need, however far you're going to run it for your exhaust to go. But it just goes right in here. It just goes right in, okay? Now, the next thing to do is to cut a piece of this, big enough to fit, with a little bit of slack around. So maybe a 3-inch line.
Go Rachel, Riz.
Go, Rachel, go.
We'll just wait.
No pressure.
So goes the days of our lives.
Okay, so you've got a little smaller piece, and what we're going to do, before I set that, we're going to slip this over the end, like this. You don't have to glue it even. I mean, it's not going to be pushed around by anything. You're going to just hold it over the end, and you just slide it in. Just like that. It's a tighter fit, but it will go in. Okay? Now, you don't have mosquitoes coming through here, and with this basket over here, you don't have mosquitoes or squirrels or anything else coming through here. So now your barrel is protected from strangers getting in your tank. Okay? So, thanks for the cutting. I appreciate it. I'm going to leave this right here and we'll pick this up. Now we get to the last part, which is the last hole, which is that goes out. Tell my daughter when they were growing up, and I said, the most important thing about bank accounts is your gazetas must exceed your gazetas. And in this case, your gazetta is really going to be vastly larger than your gazetta, because you're going to only come out to a 1-inch line, which came in through a gutter that was like 4 inches by 3 inches. So, all the tools that I need are right here. Now let's talk about the strategy of the hose bit. If your exhaust is in this direction, that might mean that this barrel is sitting at the corner of your house. Right here's the corner of your house, maybe, and here's a downspout. And that's going away from the house. Well, where's your flower bed? Probably that way. Not necessarily, because you may be wanting to water around the corner. So you decide which way you want the faucet to face. Once you screw this in, you can screw it in, well, I'm sorry, this is not the same design, this is a little different hose bit. So we're gonna just do this one straight up and down. And so we're gonna drill the hole first. Would anyone like to drill the hole?
Back.
Okay. All right. We're gonna line this up where it is opposite the downside. And remember rocket science? Goes right there. Okay? And I'll let you drill that and I will hold it. You got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you want to be
Ready?
perpendicular to it. Okay?
Ready?
Ready.
Careful.
Keep
going.
going. All right, let's back it off a second. Just back it up a little bit. All right? Now, when you go to start again, keep pushing. All right? And once you go through, take your finger off the trigger and let it stop. Inside. Okay? Perfect. Well done.
Half gun will travel. Just call her pallet.
Now, this is the hardest part. I'm not going to candy coat this one for you. This is the hardest part, is screwing this in. The reason is that hole is slightly smaller than what we're going to screw into it. The reason is so that you get an interference fit. That's what they call it in the industry. I'm an engineer, sorry. This is 1 inch, and that's 15/16 of an inch, slightly less. So, now you have to push on this. And it takes a little bit to get it started. And you want to try to keep it straight so that it doesn't walk on you and turn off at an angle.
Where's it gonna walk to?
You also have to hold your face right.
Absolutely. The tongue has to be against the right cheek.
Your other right.
So this wouldn't be to put the plumber's tape on this because of the height?
No. Not for this.
Okay.
What will happen is over the years, you're, by moving the hose around, get one straight. By moving the hose around, you'll loosen it, and eventually it may start to leak. When you notice the leak, I've got an example tube of silicone sealant.
You will.
Am I actually epoxied this or not?
That's what I did too.
Did I say I was a design engineer? I wasn't a manufacturing engineer.
You did say this was the hardest part.
Hope that hose is on a Challenger ain't that.
Now I'm getting a good plate.
They won't charge you too much for not putting this out.
That's just gotta be a pain in the belt to do.
Gotta be an easier way.
Yeah.
Drill here, your hole with silicone.
All right, way to go.
And for a while, if it starts to leak, tighten it, just turn it tighter and get it to bite in farther because there's a slight increase to the size of the bronze piece. And so it'll get tighter if you screw it a little farther. When that all fails, put some sealant around. Okay?
Sweet, sir. All right.
And thank you very much. This is an example of facility. Probably one of the small ones. This is a good size.
All right, now I get to talk a little bit about how we're going to make wicking tubs. And wicking tubs or wicking gardening can be in several different kinds of sizes. One of them can be one of these mineral tubs. And the last time that I was here, I asked if anybody in the class knew if there was a source of these things, and somebody piped up and said, oh, I got a bunch of those and I'll give them to you. And so that's where I got this one and several of the others. And we give them away every time that we teach this class. My point about that is if any of you have a source of them, bring them to class and share them with your classmates if you have availability of them. And that way you can take and share them and make your own.
What did you call that? A mineral?
Mineral tub. They are typically used for cattle in the wintertime for them to get their molasses tubs. Sometimes they're called molasses tubs. But if somebody has a ranch with a lot of cattle, they typically put these out. And the guy who I had talked to usually gets 5 of these every week. Every week. So anyway, the first thing that we're going to do is talk about how we're going to take and make it. And we're going to drill a hole in the tub. And that hole is 3.5 inches up from the bottom. So where this thing is right over here, I'll pass this around. This is up 3.5 inches because the pipe that we're going to be putting in there is a 4-inch pipe on the inside. And so what that does, it leaves a 1/2 inch of air inside of this pipe. And that air is to aerate your plant from underneath. Because there's no holes in the bottom of this thing. Only hole that is in there is that one hole that's 3.5 inches up from the bottom. And the reason why you want that is because, number one, this can be on top of the ground, so if you had a lot of rock, it can be above that. But secondarily, if it's near trees, the tree roots will not grow up into your garden because they can't get in there, you see? So you keep the bottom sealed. You want the water to stay in there as a water reservoir. But you need that 1/2 inch of air in here to keep it from getting stagnant. And so that 1/2 inch in air, if you think about it for a little while, if the plant is using water, then what happens is the air gap gets larger and larger and larger as the water goes down. And then when you fill it up, then the air gap is going to take and be pushed into your plant, and you aerate your plant from underneath. So I'm going to take and send this around. There's a second hole that's on here. This hole that's over here is for a pipe that you may have seen where if you have a water heater, under the water heater you have a pan, and the pan has a little overflow. There's a specific fitting that goes in there, and you could use that also as an example. And if you do that, the dimensions for that are over here. So I'm going to take and send this around. You can just pass that around and start here with that. And then I'm going to send this piece around. I think I want to send this around. Oh, there it is. Anyway, I'm going to send this around. This is the pipe that's used inside. It's sewer pipe, and it was what we used to use in the old sewer system or the leach field. The water used to go through here, and it would take and leach out. So there are holes all the way around it, and you'll see the holes as you go through. Those holes are important for getting the water to take and come out. Then around this, either the small piece or the large piece, is what we call a sewer sock. And this is just a material that is typically used when it was used as for a sewer system. And the sewer sock just keeps dirt from getting inside of the container. And so that sewer sock, I'm going to take and send I'll send this piece around, but I'll need that when we get ready to do the other piece. So I have a long piece, that's for the big piece of pipe, and then we have that short piece, that'll be a short piece. And this is, the only thing that this does is keep the dirt out of your water reservoir. So the system itself is made into that, and then there's one last piece, And that's this piece of pipe that's coming around on that blue piece that's coming around. This is just a 3-inch piece of 1/2-inch pipe. And I take one of those couplings that go in between, and I cut it in half with a saw, a chop saw. Now, if you're going to do that, you need to stick a piece of pipe in there so you have something to hold on to. And then you take and run your chop saw through it very, very slowly. If you don't, it's going to shatter and it's going to send pieces every which way. Ask me how I know that. And so that's what this is, and it's just 2 pieces, and we're going to end up with a piece of that on either end of this, the other way. And the reason why we have this is because we're going to clamp the part of that sewer sock on the inside, and on the outside we're going to put a piece of screen and keep the mosquitoes out. So that's what this is for, and it should slide back and forth so that you can take and grab onto it. But that's all that is. So now you have seen the container, and inside of the container we have the 1 hole. And so my next step of putting this together is to glue this piece of pipe inside of that hole, so I don't make a mess on the floor. Sometimes I can do that by hand, sometimes I can't. So we have that. And so that we don't get a mess on the floor, I'm going to put it inside of here. And I'll show it to you once I get it in there. So we're going to take it first. The primer is not really necessary. I use the primer on it because it makes the glue take and hold on just a little bit better. So I typically will do that. And if you get it all over yourself, it's okay. That's why I wear a purple shirt. Pull that out.
That's primer right there, guys.
All right. All right, so now once we have that in there, next we get the old glue. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and glue just one end of this. So here we go around that, there, then around there, there. And then all I want that to do is just to set up and be glued like that. That's all there is necessary. Then I'm going to stick it out through the hole and put the other side on the other end. Okay, so I'm going to do that out of view here for a second. And around. And we'll pick that part up, put a little bit of goop on there, put a little bit of goop on that. Okay, don't drink that. All right, so now we have that piece of pipe in there, and you can see that that pipe is going to take and be able to move in and out. And that's because you want to be able to take and clamp as we go just a little bit further. Okay, so that's the first part. The next part is, what do we connect to that? And on the inside, we're going to connect this piece of pipe. This is about 60 inches long. And it will take and fold up pretty tight the inside, so it goes inside. We take one of the sleeves and put the sleeve on here. And what we're going to do is take the end of that sleeve, and I'm just going to take it and put it around the inside of that pipe that's in there. So I just take this and I wrap it around the pipe, and then I put a zip tie on it. Now, zip ties are kind of cool. Some of you may not have had a chance to play with zip ties very much. So what I want to do is have you take a couple of zip ties. And the reason why I want to take and pass these around is because when you get the zip tie has a bulb on one end and a flat side on the other end. So as you get it, take a look at that. And the zip tie goes into the flat side. When you put it in there, it goes into the flat side. If you put it into the other side, it won't grip. And so I say that all those guys typically know that. They say, well, of course, there's a But there's a lot of ladies who don't get a chance to play with these very much. And so that's how they go, and that's why I'm passing that around so you can see. If you put it in there and you start pulling it, it'll lock and it won't come back out. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is while that's passing around, I'm going to take and put this on the end of that pipe on the inside. So bear with me for just a second.
If you do it right.
Oh, you didn't have to shoot a picture of that? Good girl.
All right, so now what I've got is, I've got that piece of stock. Let me turn it this way, maybe you can see that better. There, I have it zip tied to that end. And all I do is just put a zip tie. You don't need to cut it off. You don't need to do anything like that. All you want it to do is just be on there so that it doesn't come loose. And once you get the dirt in it, it's not going to come loose. So now, the other end of that pipe is going to go to the fill pipe. And here's my fill pipe. So it's not that fill pipe. Fill pipe. Did I leave the fill pipe when I was in the car?
I don't believe there was anything left in the car.
The fill pipe, when you use a fill pipe, this is a small fill pipe. When you use the fill pipe, you want to take and have the end of it, cut it at an angle, like a 30 or 45 degree angle, so that when it's sitting in there, the water will flow freely. If I put it this way and it sits on the bottom, the water won't come out of there, you see? So if I put it this way so that it's on that angle then allows the water to take and come out of there to be able to fill the tank. And what I like to do on these is I like to use a piece of pipe that is 1 inch, 1.5 inches, or 2 inch. And we have a 2 inch pipe, piece of pipe that has disappeared. And so I don't know where the 2 inch piece of pipe is at the moment. So I can't put that part together. But that all said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on here to show you how it goes. I'm going to have to take this off because I want to use it in the other system. But this is the process of how it's going to take and go together. So now once the sewer sock is on there and it's tight, I just put it all the way down to the bottom. And the good news is this stuff is fairly stretchy so that you can take and pull on it. It's okay. I mean, it's got some stretch to it. And all you're going to do is to take the fill pipe and put it inside of the tube just a little bit, hold it in place, and then take another zip tie, and then you put the zip tie around there and then zip that in place. So now both of these things would be together. And then, after that, then it just drops inside of the tank, push it down into the bottom, and that's what it looks like. And it just fits in there, it'll stay in there just that same way.
Okay.
So that part right there is going to be the part that is going to hold the water. That's part of your water reservoir. The other part of your water reservoir is going to be one of these, and wherever that sock went, there it is. Thank you very much. And so the other part of your reservoir is going to be one of these socks. And so the first thing that I do with this is I just cut a little piece about 12 inches long, and then I make a bunch of S's. And once you make a bunch of S's, all you're trying to do is just take and bunch it together. And then you take a zip tie, and I find it easier if you put the zip tie right under your thumb, then you can thread it. And then I just take and seal that one end. Then we put this inside. And as I mentioned before, this stuff is stretchy. And so it doesn't really make any difference if you stretch it. And then once you get it around there, I think Stephen went out to see if he could find that piece of pipe that we displaced. And then this takes and then locks that together, and that's all there is. It's just as part of your reservoir. Now, here's the important part about the reservoir. When you look at the bottom of this bucket, you should have about 20% of the bucket not covered by the pipe. So the pipe should cover about 80% of the bottom. And then, once you put that in there, I typically just take and drop that in like that, and now I'm at about 20% of the bottom, and that 20% of the bottom that's open is where the wick is. You didn't find it?
No fill pipe.
Okay, so now I have 20% of the bottom, and that 20% of the bottom is where dirt is going to be. That dirt is then going to take and wick the water up to your plant. And that water will wick up about 12 to 18 inches as you have your garden going. So once you put the water in the fill pipe, then the water reservoir is in there. The water now takes and wicks up, just like a wick on a lamp. The water wicks up, and as the water wicks up, then your plant will feel it, and then they will take off. Now, and I'll get your question in just a second. When you first plant seeds, you have to take and plant the seeds or the small plants from the top and water from the top. But once the plant gets to be about 4 inches tall, then the roots are deep enough that they will sense the water. Once they sense the water, they'll grab it and they take off. Then, for water inside of this, once you fill it up with dirt, the water that's going to be inside of here is going to take and wick up. Now let's suppose we put dirt in it today, and then we put water in it. And how long do we put the water in? Until it comes out the overflow pipe, you see? So we keep putting water in until we see the water coming out of this little pipe. And so then the reservoir is full. But if you think about that, dry dirt that was inside of there is going to take and suck up some of that water. So tomorrow, we have to put in some more of that water in order to take and keep it saturated. So tomorrow I would do it, and I would even do it a third day. By the time you get a third day, you put water in the fill pipe, it's going to take and maybe take a quarter of a gallon. It's really not very much at all. So once that water is in there and it is fully saturated, then it will continue to go up. And you only need to put water in here every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks you put water in here and it takes and wicks up. And if you think about that, well, the water is going down because it's wicking up into the plant. The air gap is getting bigger, and when you fill it up, the air gap is pushed up into the plant. Then, once it starts producing fruit, then you're going to need to take and put it in water in there every week. So while the plant is growing, every 2 weeks, once it starts producing fruit, it needs more water, and then you put just a little bit more water in there once every week. Yes.
I was just wondering, I'm going to make this, what size is the fill pipe? Like,
the fill pipe that goes in here, which I don't have,
right.
That fill pipe is either going to be a 1-inch pipe, 1.25 inches, or 1.5 inches, or 2 inch. But you don't need anything bigger than that. And the reason why I say that is because if you're going to fill this up with a hose, you can't fit the hose inside of there. You're kind of aiming at it, if you will, like the guy in a urinal, if you will. You're trying to aim to get the water in there, whereas if it's a 1 inch or larger, the hose will fit down inside.
No, it's not that one in the top of the toolbox right there?
No, this is the extra one that Stephen had. I saw this one, but it's not large enough to fit inside of it.
How high does this come up? Yeah, from the top?
Typically, you want to cut this to be about 24 inches. And so when it's inside of the tank, it sits up about that far. If you have a plant that is going to be low plant, and it's going to be a little bit taller than this, then you can make this taller. The height of this doesn't really make any difference as long as it's taller than the outside. And so then this would go onto there. Once that's onto there, then you have a completed wicking bucket. So they go together really rapidly. If you have the parts cut, you can put one of these together in just about 10 minutes. I mean, they're really, really easy to put together. You need to have some kind of a bucket. you can use a 55-gallon drum that you cut in half. And so if you do that, you just take and cut the 55-gallon drum in half. Make sure that the bung holes that are at the top are screwed down tightly so you don't have a leak. Since I use them for wicking buckets also, including this, I just glue them in place. I just put some PVC cement around and glue them right in place because I'm never ever going to take them out again. And that way it's a solid reservoir that holds water. Now, you don't have to just make them out of this. You can also take and make them out of a 5-gallon bucket. This is a pickle bucket and a 1-gallon jug. And you can make a wicking container out of this. Now, what the difference is did you have the class on square foot gardening yet? Talk about square foot gardening. The logic of the square foot garden is that if you took your garden and you divided it into 1 foot squares, what can you plant in 1 square foot? Like how many carrots could you put in there, how many cucumbers, how many tomatoes, and so on. And so the logic of this is a square foot gardening because that's approximately 1 square foot. And so for you to do this, what you would do is you just take any bucket, and sometimes people get really hung up on, well, it's going to be a food grade bucket. Well, wait a minute. When was the last time you got a food grade hose? Just saying. So I don't really worry about that in my garden. Even with the tubs, the barrels, if they had something really caustic in it, then I wouldn't use it. But if it had something like soap or cleaning supplies of some kind, you really don't have a problem with it. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that for you. So a paint bucket would be just fine. You use a paint bucket, or you had another bucket that had something that would be like a stucco coloring that's going to go on your building. I'd use that bucket. I'm sorry?
Home Depot sell those too.
Yeah, you can buy them at Home Depot. If you have a friend who has a restaurant, or you know somebody who has a restaurant, they use a lot of pickles, and that's where this bucket came from. I'm sorry.
Sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut is another. So anything that's a 5-gallon bucket. Now, instead of drilling the hole up 3.5 inches from the bottom, on this bucket, you're going to drill the hole so that it's about 5 inches or less. Don't drill it higher than 5 inches. And if you think about this for a second, if this is sitting inside of here, you see where the overflow hole is going to be. The overflow hole right here is well inside of this container. So the container is going to have not only water in it, but it's going to have the air. And so inside of this container, you take and drill about 16 holes, and it's difficult for you to see them, but I have 2 holes here and 2 holes here, all the way around on all 4 sides. So there's those 16 holes, and then I drill 4 holes here at the top to help let the air out of here. So the purpose of those holes is so that the water will take and come out of there, saturate the bottom of this bucket, and then whenever it gets to that hole, it will overflow. You'll see the water coming out there, so then you stop filling it, you see. So this particular container is a lot easier to make, and inside of here, using the square foot gardening, you can put 1 tomato plant, you could put 1 pepper plant, 1 cucumber plant, you can put about 9 pea plants in here, about 16 radishes, or about 9 carrots, eggplant, 1 eggplant. So you can, that's square foot gardening. And all you have to do is research square foot gardening, and it'll say, there'll be a table that'll say inside of 1 square foot you could do. Sometimes what we will get is people who want to take and plant too much. Like for instance, in square foot gardening, it will tell you that you can put 2 cucumber plants inside of 1 square foot. Well, to put 2 cucumber plants in here is too much. You only put 1 in here, don't put 2. And the reason why they can say that on a square foot gardening is because there's soil adjoining it. Here there's no soil that's adjoining it. But you can put a tomato plant, a cucumber plant, and when this goes together, you want to take and get a piece of pipe that's going to be the same size as this hole that's up here, as tight as you can get it. And so that's how I happen to have this one. I don't know what we do with the other one. And so this piece of pipe fits in there. And notice that when it's sitting in there, it kind of sits on an angle. You see it at an angle? If I go like that, you can see the angle. The reason why that angle is kind of important is that I have a hole that's going to be right there, that's my overflow, but I also have a handle, and I might want to move this bucket someplace else. And so when you put this in here, you want to have that handle pointing toward the back. And so if it's in the middle of the bucket like this, then I can still take and pick this up without it being hitting that. Now, if you go this way, put this on this side, and then put it in there, now you're in trouble. Okay, so you have to think ahead, put that sucker on the other side, and then you're going to take and be able to take and use this as your wicking bucket that you can move around. Now, is it critical that I take and seal this hole right here? It's not really, but I want to make sure I don't get dirt inside of here that's going to take up space for my water. And so all I have to do is to take a piece of duct tape, just take a piece of duct tape, put it on the thread, wrap that sucker around.
Duct tape and zip ties.
I'm sorry?
My two favorite tools, duct tape and zip ties.
Oh, yeah. All right, and so then all we're going to do is just take and work it so that it's going to be tight. And then once I get that on there, you can see that this is now ready to take and be filled with water. Then it's going to go inside the middle of this tank, and remember, we want that slope to go toward the back where that overflow hole is. So it goes in there like that, right in the center, and you just fill it up with dirt, and you're ready to take and plant once you take and fill it up with water. So this process is pretty simple.
So those, with the bucket, you wouldn't put the pipe through the overflow?
Yeah, you don't need the pipe, you'll see the water coming out. You'll actually see the pipe that's going to be coming out of the side of that, around that pipe. You get a leak that's going to come out of the black bucket. Sorry? Oh, the side hole. These holes that are in here can be anywhere from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, all of those holes. And on there, I have a total of 20 holes. I have 4 on each side, all the way around, and then I have 4 at the top. And I try to put them near the bottom because you want the water to leak out. You want it to go out. So don't start drilling your holes up in here, or the water will never get out of here, you see. So you want to drill them down close to the bottom so that you get the maximum amount of water out of there. But again, when we're talking about the hole, remember, this is all you're going to have in the way of a reservoir inside of here. The rest of this is air.
So you really don't want to fill that bucket any higher than the top 4 holes on the cab. So if you do, then cover up your air vents.
No, the air vents are okay. The air is going to go in and out no matter what. So when you fill the water in here, you put the water inside of there until it comes out the hole. Whenever it comes out the hole, you're done. But again, you need to do it again tomorrow to get the soil so that it's moist all the way through. Plants really like consistent watering. You already know that. It's a matter of, can you put the water in there so that they are able to take the water whenever they want the water. If you were to take your garden and you were to take and water it well today, and then you wait a week or 10 days and water again, your garden doesn't like that. They like to have consistent watering, and so the consistent watering allows the plant to grow better and you get far better crops out of it. Yes, sir. Tim.
What Larry's saying is absolutely correct, especially with tomatoes. You don't give them a lot of water, then you give them a lot of water, and they break and pop on you, etc. We all know that. But the other nice thing that he's done is with the black molasses barrels. If y'all use a bunch of those, and I've got some friends that use this principle, because in the middle of the summertime, those black molasses barrels, they suck in that heat from the sun. And so the soil really inside the black molasses barrel is even warmer than the soil in a level garden area. So the wicking system with that constant moisture, as we learned in several classes earlier, when we have freezes to go out and water your big bushes and special flowers and everything to help keep them from freezing, it's the same principle. The water is an insulator, so it's in the wicking process, so it keeps your tomatoes and other vegetables constantly with a certain amount of water. And that way you're not having to go around with a water hose thinking, well, how much am I gonna need to put in here this time? And if you have to leave for the weekend and you can't find a little girl, little boy around where you live to water a little bit while you're gone, the wicking system is still taken care of those plants as those roots have already gotten down through the wicking system. And it all works really great together. Thank you, well done.
Something that's kind of important about your garden, never ever put your garden on the west side of your house. And because the heat here in Texas, in central Texas, will just burn it up. You want to make sure that your garden is going to be in the shade starting at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you will take it, it'll be cool enough so that the plants are going to continue to go. We do two things bad in terms of home gardening. Number one, we don't water enough. Number two, and more likely, we water too much. And the reason why we water too much is because we go out there and we look at the garden at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and all the leaves are looking like, and you think, oh, it needs water. And so you put water in there, and that's just sun wilt. It just will because it's so hot outside. And so don't water it just because they look like that. If they look like that at 8 o'clock in the morning, they need water. But don't put your garden on the west side of your home. North side, east side is the best because it's going to get the morning sun, and then starting at about 2 o'clock, it's going to have the shade. And if you don't have the availability of shade from your home or from trees, well, then put something up there to give it some shade in the afternoon. The shade in the afternoon is kind of important where we are here. Now, somebody's going to get this to take home, and I really apologize for not having a 2-foot piece of pipe to be able to put through there and to zip tie it. But that's all that has to be done, and it's ready to go, ready to have dirt in it. So that all said, just a quick kind of a review over the process of the bucket. A typical 5-gallon bucket, it's going to be about 10 inches wide and about 15 inches tall. And there's a reason for me talking about this, in that there's an overflow and no more than 5 inches. It's about 5 inches is good. It can be down to about 4 inches, if you will, 4.5. And then after that, the bucket is going to get in there. You're going to cut about 18 to 20 holes, and they can be an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch, something similar to that. And then the fill pipe is going to go in, and all you're going to do is put some tape around the top of the lift of that, and then the fill pipe is going to take and fill the water. You want it in the middle of the bucket because you want to have surface area of dirt all the way around it to be able to take and wick up. And then you put the dirt inside, and once the dirt is inside, then you take and fill it up with some water. There's the water, and then when the water gets to be whatever the height of that hole is, it's going to start coming out over there. And if you think about it, this part over here is going to be full of air. That's the air that aerates your roots from underneath. And then once the plants go in there and they start taking the water out of there, that air gap is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we talked about the square foot gardening. You can think of it as being a square foot. And so in the square foot gardening, you can do things like you can put 1 tomato plant in there or 1 eggplant in there. You could also take and put 1 melon plant, and there's 1 more there. That happens to be, I think, cabbage. Yep, that's a cabbage plant. Or you could put 2 cucumber plants. I would not do that. I would just put 1 in a bucket. And then you can put 4 of those marigolds in there. You can put 4 of the basil in there, 4 plants of basils. Here's some lettuce. We've got 4 kinds of lettuce in there. All of this is just typically out of the square foot gardening manual. So there's nothing magic about this stuff. 8 peas. You can put 9 onions in there. You can put 9 of the bean plants. And we have 9 more of the spinach, I believe it is, and then we go to radishes over there. Then you're into 16 if you're going into some kind of the green onions or radishes, and that's basically the bucket. And so you all know that it's very important that they get a certain amount of sunlight. And I don't like a lot of the definitions that say full sun, because to most of us, full sun means in the sun all day long from the time the sun rises to it sets. But they're only talking about 6 hours of sun in full sun. So get the shade in the afternoon. You also want to make sure that in addition to the shade, that when you're putting your gardening together, don't forget the mulch. Mulch helps to keep the water in there. It keeps the water to be kind of stable in there. You don't have to water as much. I already mentioned about consistent watering. Plants absolutely want consistent watering. And then whenever you're going to get stuff growing there, whenever it starts putting fruit out, and if the fruit starts to age, it thinks its job is done and it stops producing. So you need to harvest promptly. If you let your cucumbers get really big, the plant says, okay, I'm done for the year, and I can kind of die off. And instead of that, you want to make sure that you harvest promptly, make sure you take the weeds out of the system as you go through, and then if you have any of those cool pests that are in there, you want to get rid of those. And then the last part is to take and make sure that you fertilize. You know, plants are very much like us in that they like to eat too. And so you want to take and make sure that you feed them. And I don't know, do you have a rule of thumb for the master gardeners for what that time? I use 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks I fertilize my garden. And it works very well for me. My tomatoes in these buckets, in the black barrels, my tomatoes, cucumbers, and tomatillos, I get them 7 feet tall. I mean, they get huge. But they are consistently watered. That's one of the keys. Now, I do want to talk about one last thing in our last couple of minutes. We want to prepare to do the ticket kind of thing. The tickets are all there. And I'm going to change this over.